Welcome to Raging Bullets, a DC Comics fan podcast, episode 270. Welcome to Raging Bullets. I'm Sean Whalen, drnorge on the comic forums, and I'm joined as always by my co-host Jim. Sean, at one point in time, you actually thought we could do this on one episode. So says the sensei of the whatnot, Segulin and the Duke of
How's it going, eh?
On this episode, we're talking about League of Extraordinary Gentlemen 1 through 3. We also have a opening intro discussion talking about some of the DC news on the source, and we have some voicemails as well, with some chat about stuff that's coming up in the coming month. So that's kind of a nice packed episode, 3 hours for your enjoyment. We are proud members of the Comics Podcast Network and the League of Comic Book Podcasts. Jim, DCBService.com is offering again this month all 52 DC number 2 issues at that special discount. Regularly $159.48, 50% off, only $79.74. They're also doing a special next month. I'm not sure if the special next month is going to be identical, but I'm sure it's going to be very similar for fans. And I love that because of the fact that we won't actually have the books. Like next month when the books start being released, we're going to be ready to start pre-ordering the number 3 issues. So this is a great chance for people to start receiving all of those books next month. They can pre-order everything if they'd like to without sitting there and saying, oh my gosh, I'm killing myself doing that. It's a great acknowledgement of the fact of the way people pre-order. And then the following month in October, if anybody's making any changes, they'll be able to do that without having to worry about that discount. You know what I mean? So I thought it was kind of a cool way of them acknowledging their audience base. And I know the 50% off is only for if you're ordering the bundle. So it's a special discount for everybody that's really taking that a chance to pre-order all the, I guess there's 48 books at $2.99 and 4 books with a $3.99 price point, and they're all 50% off if you get all of them. So it's kind of a cool deal. And I want to thank DCBService.com for doing that again for another month, but also doing a similar offer for next month, because I think that's just a great acknowledgement of your readership, and that's very cool for them to do that. So thank you, DCBService.com. Over at InStockTrades.com, I want to shout out that if you haven't been read it yet, League of Extraordinary Gentlemen Volume 1, the trade paperback, is what we're discussing this episode. It's $14.95 regularly, 38% off, only $9.27. We're discussing Volume 1, the first 6 issues, which is the complete first arc. The second arc actually takes place years later, so it's a completely different arc. So anybody that hasn't read League of Extraordinary Gentlemen, now's your chance to pick it up. Orders $50 or more give you free shipping. So thank you, InStockTrades.com, for supporting us. And James, what kind of a podcast are we?
The Raging Bullets is a spoiler podcast. We go in-depth into plotline, story twists, and whatnot, the comics we're discussing on the show. So, if you haven't read the books, you may want to come back later so you can better enjoy the show.
I noticed you added the to the beginning. That was kind of new. I mean,
really?
You've been doing that recently. You've been the Raging Bullets. So it's kind of I'm not critiquing it or anything like that. It was just something I noticed. I'm captivated by you.
Oh, okay.
So I'm endlessly fascinated with what you're going to throw at me new. And the has been something that you've been doing new. Because you used to say Raging Bullets before without the. Where did the come from? Do you know?
No. I literally there's no thought behind it.
I was giving you a chance to have some kind of profound explanation and all that. So without further ado, Jim, let's go and talk comics then.
Carter Hall, scientific genius from a far-off world, flies into action as Hawkman.
Jim, before we go into talking about League of Extraordinary Gentlemen, there's a couple little quick DC news tidbits I want to talk about. I do follow the Source blog a lot, just the internet. I go to Newsarama and Comic Book Resources and comic related and stuff like that. I tend to jump any cool news. I tend to jump around to whatever websites, and we're very fortunate that we have an audience base that, like, through our forum and through Facebook and now Google Plus and stuff like that, will post links to things that they've found on the net. Because a lot of times during the week when I'm prepping for the show, I don't have time to jump around as much as I'd like to. So we're lucky that listeners have done that. Actually, did you hear about the Dead Man series?
No.
I guess there's in development a Dead Man series with the CW. Now, how far that's going to go or whether it'll actually launch into a series, I don't know. But I actually think that concept, if you think about shows like Supernatural, for example, that's very successful on the CW, Dead Man as a concept could wind up being a super cool show. So that was something I didn't know what your thoughts were on that. Was that a program you'd be interested in seeing?
Yeah, I'd give it a try. definitely one, just the DC connection, but two, just the kind of general concept. I'm assuming they're not going to it's going to be the dead man dealing with regular people and able to jump into bodies and that type of style, sort of a Quantum Leap-esque, but not changing time, just helping people along. But how, the main character, when he jumped into a body, it was his shape, it was his face that you saw. I'm assuming they'd probably do something similar, but when he looks in the mirror, he'd see the true face of the person, or, that kind of story arc.
The Source Code, I don't know if you saw that movie with Jake Gyllenhaal that came out recently, did something like that where you jump in like the last couple minutes of a person's life, which you wouldn't, it's not going to be that. It's more of what you're saying. But one of our listeners actually on Facebook came back with it saying, hey, it would be cool if it had a Quantum Leap kind of feel to it. I loved that show.
Yeah.
So, the concept of Dead Man really lends itself to television because you could have, while you have an ongoing story arc, for the character, you could have very contained, very interesting start-to-finish 1- and 2-part episodes of the show that each one of them could be very different depending on who he jumps into and what he has to deal with because of that. So to me, that on paper, if it's done right, has an intense amount of potential at being a show that really has limitless variety. Because if it gets, things start getting boring, just have him jump into somebody new. And you can have multiple people during an episode.
Yeah, that's the other thing, because that's something Quantum Leap never did, where it was always he's in the one body. With Dead Man, if he's jumping, he could actually jump in multiple people and kind of switch things around, because we see him do that in Adventures. Any stories we've seen him, he's jumping from here, he's jumping from there, and so I don't know. I think it immediately, first as I start thinking, is Quantum Leap, but it could be a Quantum Leap Plus.
The other thing I would think would be interesting on it, too, is I wouldn't want him to know right away he could do all that. I would want him to discover, abilities that he has along the way. Like at first it'd be cool to see him just jumping into people and not knowing that maybe he would have the option to control them. You know what I mean? Kind of like him being in the background at first, and kind of watching what was going on around him, but then realizing he could come forward and control the person, and seeing him learn what he's able to do in his current form, and then that he's able to then jump from person to person, and how he would learn to do that, and what that means, and seeing what kind of limitations he has as well, and how he overcomes those limitations. I think there's an endless potential for it as a television series. I just think it could be something really cool. Any of those shows, it all depends to me on the writing. First and foremost, it has to be good writing, good acting. But then also promotion a lot of times, because I think there's been a lot of great shows over the years that haven't made it because of lack of promotion, lack of the time slot. To me, what I'm excited about with it is mentioning shows like Supernatural. It seems like something, and then there's shows like Vampire Diaries and stuff like that. It seems like something that fits already into the CW format. Like they've got that new. There's a number of new shows that are coming out, not just for CW, in the fall lineup. This show seems like, I know it wouldn't be coming out this fall, obviously, because it's being developed right now, but it seems like something that would fit into the current television lineup of what's going on. And I think networks are looking for something that's complementary to programming that their viewing audience is already interested in. So I think that stands a chance. I don't know.
Yeah, the whole Supernatural style, with dealing with the freaky and the funky, is making a really good comeback on TV, especially a serialized story. Now the only thing I do wonder is, because Dead Man was always kind of like the loner. So do you think they keep with that loner thing where he's traveling, to different towns and helping people, or would they develop a regular cast that his go-to people?
Well, you'd have to develop a cast of some sort. So, there'd have to be people that probably be from his past life. That would be, or, maybe new friends that he meets along. Well, it doesn't have to be from his past life. It could be new people that he meets along the way. Could be completely divorcing himself from the past life. I don't know what route they'd go with that. Mm-hmm. But, for a television show, you have to have regulars. Obviously, you're going to have the person that's trying to hunt him down. And maybe the twist could be those are people from his past life trying to find him. I don't know.
Well, because I'm thinking of the old Hulk TV series where really he was going from town to town. Same thing that Highway to Heaven, where you had the Michael Landon and what's his name were the only two real constant reoccurring characters, and they were traveling from town to town, and helping people. So every week there was new supporting cast, but you had that main character.
Honestly, that would be an interesting, I think, because we don't have a lot of programs like that on right now, with where you've just got like one or two main characters. And an ever-changing supporting cast. That would actually be an interesting twist. Actually, Supernatural, the main two characters are really, for the majority of the program, have been your major reoccurring characters on the show, and that worked incredibly well. So I don't know. I would be all for him being a loner.
Yeah, me too. I actually would like to see that.
Mm-hmm. So, I guess I'm going to kind of go back. I don't know what the premise is going to be of it. I read some of the news on our show forum, and, as far as that it was in development and just some of our listener reactions, it was actually on Facebook. And I don't know, it just to me seems like a concept that, if done right, there's a lot of potential for variety of the program and keeping it interesting. I think the trick to it, though, is you have to keep it from being – you can have like 1 and 2 part single episodes, but I do like strong overarching season arcs, where there's a beginning and then a cliffhanger at the end, or some kind of big, conclusion at the end of it. So I'd love to have that thread running through it as well. I'm not saying that the episode should feel contained, because I like the programs you're talking about where, okay, he's here this episode, and then he travels to this new spot the next episode. But it would be fun for that travel to be for a goal. Like he's trying to get somewhere, he's trying to discover something. There's got to be some kind of hook there. So I don't know. I was something that I thought was interesting. I figured I'd throw it your way real quick just to see what your thoughts were. It's something I hope takes off, because I think there's a lot of concepts in comics that would make great television shows. And they don't have. Do they like? Let me ask you this question: when comic shows hit television, do they have to follow the comic exactly for you?
For me, no.
Yeah.
If I'm getting a good story, I'm okay with it. But let's be honest, the majority of comic book fans, they start complaining if there's one slight iota difference. Oh, the tint on the costume's off. This is the worst thing I've ever seen in my life. And there hasn't even been a single episode aired. They just saw a still image. We have a lot of fans who just react, just so extreme to one side of hatred over the smallest, tiniest change in details. Well, that it's tough.
Smallville went through its entire run, from the beginning to the end. Yet that show was incredibly successful. Considering that it was, and I do think, to me, a lot of these superhero shows should be launched on like your networks, like your CWs, your smaller networks, just because I think that they tend to be more of your niche program. But I don't, like a Dead Man, I don't think that necessarily, I think in theme, it needs to stick to the concept of the comic. Thematically, there needs to be a core to it where you're like, okay, I don't want it to be totally divorced from Dead Man. So don't get me wrong on that when I'm saying, like, as a fan, I don't want it to have the Dead Man label on there and then the show is totally unrecognizable. But I love, like, regular nods back to the comics, but I also think that there should be some flexibility for television, recognizing that you're doing this for a wider range audience. Smallville had that flexibility, but in the end, I felt like it was Clark Kent that I was watching on television. He wasn't totally unrecognizable to me. I didn't feel like this is this alien character. Excuse the pun, I didn't mean it that way, but he wasn't this totally foreign character to me where I didn't recognize who he was. The same thing with his supporting cast. They took some liberties with things and introduced new characters, but like John Schneider played Pa Kent. That was Pa Kent to me. To me, he's a template now for what I see as Pa Kent. And I think throughout comic media, if the characters are handled correctly, each new iteration, each new incarnation of those characters should feel like your template for that character if they're done right. And I think that was what worked in Smallville. That's what worked in previous Superman television programs and films, was that the character casting for each of the main characters and supporting cast were so strong that those became the ones you'd look at. It's why artists will draw, a lot of times, their characters in comics to look like some of the ones that we've seen in film or television, because that's their ideal template for that character. That's their emotional connection to that character, and that's how they get them right on the paper because of that. So it'll be interesting to see if in the future, when they draw Pa Kent, I'm talking about like 10, 20 years down the road, if somebody's drawing like a John Schneider version of Pa Kent, you know what I mean? As maybe the younger version of Pa Kent, just because they grew up with the Smallville version of Pa Kent being their template for him. But Dead Man, for me, for it to work, it doesn't have to be 100% like the comic, because obviously you're not going to have him. You don't necessarily have to have him teaming up with all the superheroes and things like that. But at its core. There was a Vertigo Dead Man series, which I quite enjoyed, which obviously was its own version of Dead Man. So I think you can take the concept and keep it to its core. And I would love to see it be Boston Brand, though, seeing the circus performer. Because I think that type of atmosphere is something a little fresh and different for TV. It'd be fun to see that kind of... I liked it in The Cape, where we got to see it. I just don't think that Dead Man has to be at the carnival every week.
Yeah.
For that to work. I think that would be good for his background, to throw the acrobatics in. It would be fun to see him try to use the acrobatics in body types that aren't necessarily built for acrobatics, and how that might be a limitation. He's used to operating, being able to jump and flip and do all these, crazy acrobatic moves. But what happens when there's a body type that isn't... You get where I'm going with this?
Oh, yeah, he jumps into my body. He ain't doing any flips. But I guarantee you that.
But tell me that wouldn't be great, because you got somebody that this is his way of operating, and he has to learn how to deal with the fact that he's jumping into different body types, and that's going to provide different limitations for him. So he has to learn a whole new way of dealing with situations in those type of... to me, I think there's an endless... And what happens when he gets into somebody that was even more fit than he was, but in a different way, like the big, bulky football star?
Yeah.
What happens in that type of thing? I don't know. I think as a concept, it sounds awesome.
Well, there definitely could be some cool stuff that comes out of this. And it's, of course, as I'm saying, there could be some neat stuff. In the back of my head, I am thinking Dolph Lundgren, Punisher, or Halle Berry Catwoman. And I'm like, all right there, we can see where a cool concept can be turned wrong with the wrong story behind it.
But see, that's our problem as fans. We go to those things, and I'm not saying you're doing this. I'm not attacking you on this. What I'm saying, though, is I think we as fans go to that first, and we start downplaying something before it's even been put out there. We downplay something that's in pilot mode. See, to me, a pilot should be, and this is something that we all need to get back to, instead of completely trashing something, we got to look at pilots and also point out what's good about the pilot. Because I think studios need to know what's working and what's not. A lot of times, you mentioned the hater concept. The haters just trash it, and they never point out any of the positives. Nothing wrong with saying you didn't like something in it. But for goodness sake, if you want the show to launch and you liked certain elements of it, let them know what worked. Because if they think something is total garbage, and it might be, because you threw out a couple of them there where it's like, whoa, wait a minute. The Halle Berry Catwoman, that should have been so totally reworked. But, barring that, there are movie concepts and film concepts and television concepts where the show wasn't terrible. It just needed to be tweaked. And I think we as fans have the option to tell them, hey, this is working. If you did this, it would make the show better. So, I don't know. I as a concept, this thing hasn't even... there were people trashing this Dead Man thing.
Yeah.
And, it's not... There's nothing to view yet.
Yeah.
How do you trash something when there's nothing to view? I'm excited. I hope they do a good job with it, because to me it sounds like it could be an awesome property on television if it's done right. And wait, you and I threw out ideas on what we would like to see in it. How cool would it be if they come up with a pilot where they took it in a direction that we didn't expect and we love it?
Yeah, there's so many different directions this could go in. So who knows? We got to wait and see what they put out. I hope they actually do create it, and I hope they do find a place and give it a shot.
Why would I want them to fail? I want them to be successful. I want them to come up with a cool premise for this. I want them to throw it out there, and I want it to be a great program, because then I win. You know what I mean? So it's like,
exactly.
I'm not going to start off negative with this. I'm going to start off with hope and, hey, good luck to you, and pull it off. Talking about some other DC news on there, one of the things with the 52 in September that has worried me is writers and artists and colorists and things like that I've been really enjoying that we haven't seen. One of them I mentioned is James Robinson. And, it's on the source right now. They have a page from issue 8 of the upcoming Starman spin-off, The Shade, another Shade miniseries. This is a 12-part. And I'm so excited for this. It's starting in October, but I guess next May, issue number 8, they showed, and I love Jill Thompson art. From Sandman days, Invisibles, stuff like that. I get her original little hardcovers, like the little endless storybooks, because her artwork is just drool-worthy. Just seeing a picture of the Shade drawn by her. They're all laying on couches, relaxing and stuff like that. And I'm like, oh my gosh, this is gorgeous Jill Thompson art in May. I'm so excited to see that. But also below it, the rumor of the Justice Society has been confirmed now that there is going to be a Justice Society series. Now, I want to talk about, because Eddie Berganza says it's everything you want, but not what you expect. Now, they said there's a significant twist. One of the rumors, now this is a rumor, so please take this for what it is. One of the ongoing rumors I've heard is that it's the Justice Society of America written by James Robinson with art by Nicholas Scott, and that it takes place on Earth 2. That's been a rumor that I've heard. Now, that's a rumor. I've seen it at various places on the net. Other podcasts have talked about it. So it's not something that I came up with. This is things I've seen elsewhere. But it's a rumor. I would adore that because it takes away, you can still head in the direction they're going with the current DC universe, but yet on another Earth have the JSA be the JSA that we know and love, being the first superheroes of that world, being that team. You're also not limited on what membership you can have in that JSA. You can do everything you want with Mr. Terrific on this world, with the Karen Starr on this world and things like that, but then have over there Power Girl as we know her, have all these characters as we know them on that team. And no limitations as far as who the Justice Society of America can use, because it's on Earth 2. So you can really pull from anybody. To me, that seems like the perfect way to handle the Justice Society of America. They're not stuck to anything that's happening on the current Earth. You can tell tried and true, right to the core, great JSA stories without having to worry about pulling this character or that character out because they happen to be on the other Earth. And then there's an option to then have them meet, obviously, the Justice League through JLA, JSA crossovers. So, which that to me has me giddy as well. So, I don't know. I think it's great. And
big time.
The annual, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off there. The annual concept could come back, and that could be an annual thing, where it happens in the annuals. It doesn't even have to happen in the main series.
Oh, big time, dude. That would be. I'm sitting there as you're talking. I'm nodding, going, yes. I want to see this, and I agree completely that I like it on a different Earth. Just because if they're going through so much with this Earth and this establishment and not having Superman be the first, it doesn't throw off any of that. It doesn't change anything that they're trying to build for the current continuity. This is a nice way to do it, and they can still have the crossover. They still have the merger, and who knows, down the line, they could actually come over into this universe, and that could be part of the whole story is they're in this universe now, trying to deal with that or trying to get back to their own universe because they're the heroes of their universe, and they need to get back there. There's so many different things they could do and twists and turns that they can follow with. I like to see this, and especially if our heroes are going to be younger heroes, as in time on the battlefield, having a group of seasoned veterans, who look at life a little bit different coming in, that could really be a nice little, twist and turn in their life.
Well, sometimes team books fall into that limitation of they're stuck to the continuity that the other characters in different books and stuff like that. With this concept, you don't have to worry about that. And you can bring those characters, like you're saying, into almost anything with the fact that they could come to our world. So there's all kinds of possibilities for crossovers, reasons for those characters to be a part of a series, to get to meet other characters and things like that. Everything you're saying works still without having to say, well, I'm sorry, your team book can't use this character A, character B, character C because we're writing out that character, we're writing out that concept, we're changing it. I love everything they're doing with the 52. This, to me, is the perfect way to say, hey, what makes the JSA the cool concept? Well, these are these World War II, and I don't know if they're going to still do that. I'm guessing part of the reason why they're doing this is they're still going to make them the traditional World War II characters, the ones that were fighting there. And, with the large cast and with everything that makes the Justice Society who it is, and this would be a great workaround to the changes that have gone in the 52. Superman is the first hero on this world, but not on this one.
Yeah. Oh, definitely.
So I like that. I like that concept. I hope the creative team is what it's rumored to be. I would love to see James Robinson writing that and Nicholas Scott on it. Because to me, I don't know, did you read the last issue of Justice League of America?
Yeah.
What a great wrap-up that was. I felt like, I don't know if you felt the same way in this one, it felt like he was showing us what the potential storylines were that he was going to do, because he mentioned that he had a multi-year run planned out, and I felt like we were getting little glimpses onto what cool things he was going to do, and it was like bittersweet. I really enjoyed the wrap-up. I enjoyed the ending. I like how he tied up Donna Troy, and kind of wrapped up that storyline. He did a great job, I thought, with Dick Grayson, tying that up into where, the Bat books are heading, in September. So I really thought it was a classy way to go out, but I thought he was giving a pat to the back to the fans, saying, hey, for those of you who've been really digging the run and wanted to see what direction I was going in and what some of the storylines were that I was going to do, here's some little tastes and glimpses on where we were going to go with these characters, and I'm going to, show you how they played out. I thought that was neat. Did you feel, is that what you felt was going on there?
Oh, definitely. Big time. Kind of just to let you know where his thought was. And it was funny, when I read that, I was kind of hoping that maybe somewhere down the line we would get an Elseworld story where we would see what if a different Justice League, and actually his Justice League, give them another adventure, or some of these other stories that have these cool wrap-ups and that are leading to the future, like an Elseworld on Titans, because there was some same kind of story with Teen Titans. There was some stories that could come, there was some groundwork being laid down, but they wrapped up the story nicely, and they wrapped up everything, and I was like, okay, that was good, but you can tell that the creative team had more ideas, and kind of like I would like to get a nice Elseworld story, saying what those other stories would have been.
I would almost like a rotating classifieds. Remember those? I like those old classified series, JSA, JLA classified and stuff like that. I'd almost like a DC Universe classified, where it could be those type of tales, where it's tales that creative teams wanted to tell that aren't limited by continuity. Mm-hmm. So like you could take a James Robinson and say, hey, we're going to give you an arc, do Justice League. You could take Nicholas Scott and JT Krul, throw them on and say, hey, go ahead and do a Teen Titans arc here. Those type of things would be great. Green Arrow, any of the characters that are changing, you could then say, hey, you can tell like any kind of story that you want. Jumping back to that alternate Earth thing, one of the advantages of the multiverse in DC has always been opening up storytelling options. And to me, one of the books that we're losing in Secret Six, if for whatever reason, because of Suicide Squad or whatever, there's not enough of the team members for Secret Six available, or, for instance, a certain writer doesn't want to do a relaunch, it'd be great to set Secret Six on a different Earth.
Oh, yeah.
Or you can kind of tell whatever stories you want with that type of villain group and that type of thing. Maybe on Earth 2.
Yeah, and, you could actually even... Secret Six is a team that... Because we saw that Western one.
Yeah.
That was just a great story. It took place back in the West. These characters, they were the same, but there was the differences to them. You felt comfortable with them, but you still had to, look and see they were somewhat different. So it's, six, and actually, and there's a couple different teams I'm thinking of as we're talking, like, oh, that'd be kind of neat to, Birds, another team where seeing some alternate Earth versions of Birds of Prey would be kind of a neat thing to see.
So I'm hoping, if JSA is being, and that way I got to clarify that. I'm putting it out there like JSA is for sure being set on Earth 2, but, that's just a rumor at the moment. But if they're going with that concept, to me, that's a brilliant use of the multiverse. Taking advantage of the fact that, hey, we're setting up this cool thing here, and we're setting up ground zero on our Earth here with the 52 books, but let's not ignore our heritage and the fact that we've had a rich multiverse, and that is something at the core that's always made DC cool throughout its history. So if we're doing this relaunch of everything, let's remember that we also set up a ground zero multiverse, with things like Infinite Crisis and stuff like that, and let's play with that. I know Morrison's Multiversity series is still on tap, so there's a great option to take advantage of the fact that we've got all these unexplored Earths that I'm not saying you have to launch them all into books, you don't, but if there's a great story concept and a book concept that doesn't work in the new 52 universe, great opportunity to throw that on another Earth and just really go with it. To me, it's great comics, great storytelling. DC has an opportunity to not limit itself in any way, shape, or form with the multiverse. They really should take advantage of that. Because why limit your storytelling options? Let creators put out fantastic books, and that's going to bring people to the table.
Amen. Amen.
Hope this craft can withstand this powerful force.
Jim, we're going to kick into the first of a two-part discussion on League of Extraordinary Gentlemen. And this is one of those series, we haven't done a book of the month in a while. And I really wanted to touch on something, a classic from DC, that is it's a classic Alan Moore story. It was converted into a film, which was very different than the comic book version of it for a lot of reasons. Some of them were because characters weren't available. Some of them were just adaptation choices that the writers and directors and everything made for the film. But it'd be fun to kind of talk about our experience with League of Extraordinary Gentlemen. I knew you hadn't read the series, so I thought it'd be kind of fun. So we're going to discuss issues 1 through 3 on this one, and casually discuss also the film, because that was your first exposure to League of Extraordinary Gentlemen. So, how, as a fan of, well, I don't know if you were a fan of the film. As a person who watched the film first, what has been your experience with it? Did you enjoy the film? How did the comic compare? What has been your initial impressions on League of Extraordinary Gentlemen?
I enjoyed the film. When you said a fan of the film, that is a very accurate statement. I enjoyed the movie when it came out. I was like, oh, that's kind of neat. And then I heard everyone saying how, oh, it's so dramatically different than the comic, and that was actually something that kind of kept me away from the comic, because I was like, I really enjoyed the movie, and if everyone's telling me how dramatically different it is and how it's, I heard people telling me, oh, if you like the movie, you're absolutely going to hate the comic, and it just, there was such I came across a lot of just very visceral reactions towards people who were fans of the comics who just despised the movies, and people, oh yeah, so I kind of shied away from the comic for that exact reason, because I thought the movie was a good story. I enjoyed it. It had some classic movie moments in it with Sean Connery. You got Sean Connery in it. It's kind of hard for him to do a bad movie, and just the rest of the supporting cast. There was some nice little swerves that did catch me. I did get some surprises in it. So so going into this, I was wondering what was going to happen, and I tell you, I really enjoyed the comic. I enjoyed both, and I appreciate both of them are different stories, but there were times when I'm reading the comic, reading the Quartermain dialogue, and I'm hearing Sean Connery's voice in my head. I'm reading the Nimoy dialogue, and I'm hearing and I can't think of the actor's name right now. Yeah.
You said Nimoy.
Yeah.
Nemo.
Nemo. Hey.
You're hearing Mr. Spock? Just got to live long and prosper.
Hey, I always think Nemo with the little goldfish. I don't want to,
Well, that's a good point. Okay. That's funny.
But seriously, when I'm reading some of his dialogues, I'm hearing that actor's voice, and comparing those two characterizations, they were spot on in the movie.
Or Spock on.
Spock on. Oh, God.
I'm sorry. So go ahead. No, you're making a really good point, and I'm being an idiot, so go ahead.
Yes. But they were spot on with his characterization. This comic is the adaptation to the movie. So, this was something that and it was funny because even like the Quartermain in the movie, by the end of Volume 1, I could see this character kind of being that person. I could see the strong, Quartermain, that strong, that kind of, that great white hunter that they envisioned in the movie. I could see that person here. And it was funny because considering our introduction to Quartermain in the comic, I kind of understand why they didn't want to make him that character type for the movie. It would have shocked people, and it would have thrown people off, and it probably wouldn't have done so well in the movie industry, just because you don't want to see, him sitting there in an opium den, stoned, and Mina almost gets raped. That's not a good way to start off a movie.
One of the things I enjoyed in researching this was I took a look at the release of the original novels, and all of these characters that were the main players were originally from literature. So Alan Quartermain's novel was in 1885, The King Solomon's Mines, and it was a series of books. Did you see any of the Richard Chamberlain movies?
No.
There was actually a Richard Chamberlain movie, King Solomon's Mine, and then there was a sequel that was actually titled Alan Quartermain, and I forget what the actual the other line was, Lost Cities of something, I think. Both of them were really good. I really liked the character. It was kind of an Indiana Jones stylish type character. But these were done all the way back in 1885. And one of the things that I really enjoyed about this was, if that was taken in 1885, this is supposed to take place after Dracula, which was 1897. So if you take a look at the time placement, this is a much older Alan Quartermain. They're going off of when the character's adventures took place. So I love that Alan Moore went and looked at when each of these characters were created, when their stories were taking place, and put them chronologically in League of Extraordinary Gentlemen where they would be in their lifetime. So I thought that was something that was interesting. Campion Bond, who was in this, for example, Campion Bond was the grandfather. I always thought it was and you and I were talking about this before recording, I thought it was meant to be like an amalgamation of James Bond and the British character Campion, when really this is the grandfather of James Bond, who actually was a character in the James Bond books. So I love that, like, you know, there was a look at, literary-wise, where these characters would be and what the appropriate characters are to use in this particular storyline for the date that it was taking place. Because this is actually supposed to take place right after the event, well, not right at, but close to after the conclusion of the events in Bram Stoker's Dracula, which is what Mina Murray, that's how she comes into this whole thing. And I loved how that played out. But I agree with you on Sean Connery's portrayal of Alan Quartermain. I saw echoes of what we saw from the character in this. Obviously, they had to speed things up a little bit for film purposes, you know, where he, but his view of the whole British Empire and the bitterness that we saw from him in the film, I thought was very much what we were seeing from him in the miniseries as well. So, you know, and then how he changes as the story goes on. You know, we see a very different character at the end of the film, just like we see, as you mentioned, a very different character at the end of the comic series with him. It was funny. I watched over the last 2 days the film League of Extraordinary Gentlemen because I hadn't seen it ever from start to finish in the chronological order. I saw bits and pieces of it. When I say bits and pieces, I saw like an hour here, 45 minutes there. You know, and by the time I was done, I had seen the whole movie, but never chronologically. And I think I was one of those, like, who was greatly influenced by comic fans who were saying, oh, you know, this is awful because, you know, it was so drastically off of the graphic novel in its approach. And I actually found it kind of like what we were talking about with the whole Dead Man thing. I found thematically that it very much honored the concept of League of Extraordinary Gentlemen from the comics. I thought the character portrayals were pretty spot on to what was going on in the comic book, with the exception, like you were saying, with Alan Quartermain, he's more sure of himself, he's not as down and out as we see him in the Alan Moore comic. The Invisible Man was drastically different, but that wasn't, the studio wanted to use the Invisible Man, the original one. The reason why they couldn't get the rights, which is why he became an Invisible Man instead of the Invisible Man, and they used the Thief. So they had to actually alter that because they couldn't get the rights to the character, so that wasn't a choice. And the addition of Dorian Gray to the whole mythos of League of Extraordinary Gentlemen, the film, I thought was a welcome addition, because that was a cool story. You know, how his... and I don't know how much of the Dorian Gray, do you know anything of the history of that character?
Yeah.
How his actions led to what would happen to his portrait. So all of the scarring and withering of his portrait were due to the fact that this immortal man was making hedonistic choices in his life, and that was affecting and altering his portrait. And, you know, when she eventually turned the portrait on him in the film, it was like, wow. You know, it's knowing what that all was, which I thought was an interesting little twist that echoed and felt like it belonged in League of Extraordinary Gentlemen. I did like in the film, one little geek out that I noticed, there was this part where they were showing like carnival-type posters, you know, showing upcoming acts and things like that. They had the entire creative team, all the way down to editorial and publishers. Jim Lee's name was up there. Alan Moore, the pencilers, colorists, everything. They had everybody's name up there. It was in the background. It was kind of a cool little nod about halfway through the film. Yeah, it was neat. It was kind of a neat little thing to see. I'm always a fan of, not just at the beginning and the end of the film, making an acknowledgement of the comic work, but doing little Easter eggs in there for fans. And they did that, which was neat. And I got to tell you, the Nautilus in that film was a home run. I wanted to ride on that baby. That was a very cool-looking ship.
Yeah, and the ship in the comic also looks pretty neat with the old giant squid looking. But yeah, I got to tell you, that Nautilus did look cool. I liked the fact that Tom Sawyer was in there. I thought that was kind of a neat way to include the Americans into the whole story and not just have it be, you know, the European, countries. It's, I don't know. For me, the movie was just this great movie, and that's the thing. I was so glad that the comic hasn't taken away my enjoyment of the movie, and vice versa. So, you know, I was very, very pleased when I read this, and I didn't have any negative reaction to it.
So it's funny. You were standoffish because you enjoyed the film so much.
Yeah.
And I was standoffish to the film for the opposite reason, because I enjoyed the actual comic miniseries when it came out. Which is funny. I was looking at the cover price of it. It was like $2.95 at the time. This is going back like in 1999. $2.99 price point. So we're holding the $2.95 price point. I'm saying. So we're holding the line at like 4 cents more. How many years later? So I mean, it's really impressive that and this at the time, we're dealing with. Wildstorm was a lot more. This is part of America's Best Comics, which was a Wildstorm imprint at the time. They were not owned yet by DC. That happened somewhere shortly after this. I'm not sure when exactly, but I remember when this first came out. Alan Moore was creating his own universe with this. Tom Strong. We talked about some of those books earlier on in the show, and this is one of those miniseries that when this came out, I was blown away by it because it was something different. It felt very fresh, and I loved that they used literature from the time, because even you mentioned that they put Tom Sawyer in the film. These are all books, all the characters that were main characters in both the film and in the comics were taken from literature in the late 1800s, early 1900s. So even in that case, that fits Mark Twain when he, with Tom Sawyer and all that. So I think that's really terrific that they, when they incorporated an American character into the film, that they, went back, I think it was 1876, I think, for Tom Sawyer, if I'm looking correctly. But, you're still dealing with the late 1800s. Great time frames to pull from and all this. What did you think of the artwork? To me, that was one of the strong points of the comic series, besides, the amazing dialogue, was that there was just with Kevin O'Neill, a great art styling to the characters. And each character had a very unique visual approach that fit the character. What did you think of it, though?
See, with me and the art style, this isn't my go-to art style that I always enjoy. And so for me, I always have to take some time. I have to take multiple read-throughs, and I got to just, initially go through, get through the story, and then reread and do another drive-through, just to see where it goes, how I'm feeling on it. Now, as time has gone on, I'm much more appreciative and I'm much more open and enjoying different art styles. But I still always have that initial reaction where, okay, I gotta just kind of shift my mindset and just take a step back, look at it. It's not what I'm not my go-to style, but it's still good. And that's always going to be my initial reaction. Now, there's a couple scenes later on that I'm like, oh my God, that is awesome. So once we get past, I'd say easily Alan in Cairo, I'm really into the art, and I'm really into just where it goes through. But it always does, that stuff you say where everybody has their own individual styling. I really do see that now, and I do see some neat stuff here, little Easter eggs in the background, and those kind of just little extras that you see the art team going just a little bit beyond.
Do you think it's? And I'm not trying to put words in your mouth, so please correct me if I'm wrong on this. Do you think it's like a lot of your exposure to superhero comics that's maybe giving you that kind of feel when you hit with something like this? Because this to me I felt very comfortable with this as being something very Vertigo-y, very Sandman, very 100 Bullets. I'm looking at like a lot of things to where and I'm not saying that like kind of put it into only those two books, but I'm used to those type of a different take, a different art style. Do you think it's the lack of exposure to it, or was it just because the artist is somebody because Kevin O'Neill's art, I'm guessing this is probably your first exposure to it, right?
I believe so. I think this is my initial, dealing with him. And to be honest, part of it is when I was a kid, this art style wasn't the type of books I was reading, wasn't the type of stuff I enjoyed. I liked, more of what I call, in my mind, I call a classic comic book, or classic comic book modified and modernized. It's, this for me is artistic style comic. Where as a kid, I always shied away from books that looked like this because I was like, I don't want that. This is what I want. So I have that laden down of what was from my childhood, where I first got started into comics. This is my go-to, and that's why it's always, whenever I come across anything that's different, I do have to take a moment, stop, pause, just look at it for what it is, and then start finding the stuff that I appreciate from it.
This is another one of the reasons why I wanted to do this one, because I knew this book would be really outside anything we've done in a while. And I thought it'd be fun to see your reaction to it, and what it took for you. Because to me, this is one of the classics, and it's one of those that I think by the end of this. Well, let me ask you this: have you read all 6 issues now, or where are you at? Because I know
I've read all 6 issues on this one, and I'm looking at volume 2 right now, getting ready to jump into that, and I'm looking online for volume 3, etc., and going forward. This is a series that I am going to get the full line and and I'll get it in trades and just definitely stick with this. And then as new League of Extraordinary Gentlemen stories come out, I'll start saying, "Ooh, okay, let me get that. Let me add to my League list now." Because as I said before, I was shying away from it because everyone told me that if you like the movie, you're not going to like the graphic novel. Well, I enjoy both very much, and so I'm going to pursue this, and I'm going to pursue this going forward.
Volume 3 is being published by Top Shelf. So
Okay.
just a heads up on that. What happened was Volume 1 and 2 were published by Wildstorm. I'm not sure when it became a DC imprint. I forget, time-wise. I know when Black Dossier came out that it was a Wildstorm imprint by that point in time. So for anybody looking to try and, kind of put where this is at, Black Dossiers was meant to be a side story. Set in the League of Extraordinary Gentlemen universe. And then the actual true Volume 3 is being published by Top Shelf right now, which I have there's 2 issues of that's been out. 1910 was the first one, and I forget what the year was for the second issue, but I have both. I haven't read the second issue yet, only just because I'm a little... We started doing this, and I got a little bit behind. But you actually answered my question as far as, is this something that you want to pursue? Did you like it enough that you... And obviously, by the end of this, you got on board enough that you wanted to go further with it. So that's good. I'm glad that came out.
Oh, yeah,
of this.
big time.
I love the character of Miss Murray. And that was one I'm like, is Jim going to... Did you connect immediately who that was? Or, well, you saw the film, so yes, you did.
Yeah.
I guess I'm answering my own question there.
And to be honest, if I hadn't seen the film, I wouldn't have known who that was. It would have taken me a little bit. Just like in the film, the reveal, we find out about Mina... I didn't see coming. I kind of, and so in the book, in the series, I'm not going to be surprised when they finally do reveal it. But, in the film, when they said Mina Harker, I immediately knew who that was. Now, when they're saying Mina Murray, Wilhelmina, and especially because they're going Wilhelmina, because they kept referring to her as Mina in the Stoker, she's always Mina, not Wilhelmina. And I, did not see it unless, if I hadn't known the movie, I would have been shocked until later on when they do reveal Harker. I'll be like, oh my God, that's Mina. And that, would have been one of those cool reveals. But again, even though I knew what's going on, I knew her backstory, I still enjoyed seeing her, knowing what I know.
Well, it was interesting to see Campion Bond's reaction to her in the beginning when they first meet, because Campion Bond was one of those, I'm a James Bond junkie, and I was trying to make the connection to, is this meant to be James Bond? Is it meant to be Campion? Is it meant to be... And I was overthinking it, not realizing that, it was meant to be an ancestor of James Bond. And I think the M being thrown into this, I kept seeing this as being James Bond, and then, the M being James Bond's boss, is kind of the... nod back to James Bond, which I do think that's in play, but not as solid as I originally was thinking it was all those years ago when I read it. It's funny how I think when you make certain impressions when you first read something and you get stuck on them, I'm one of those that, I've been stuck on that for years, so I was having trouble letting it go as I was reading this, so I started doing some research because I wanted to find out who the character was, and James Bond's grandfather was actually Campion Bond. But I loved his reaction to Mina, talking about how she's viewed by society, in general. He knows what happened to her, being ravished by... And it's funny, knowing who she is and knowing that she's Jonathan Harker's wife, well, ex-wife, I should say, after all that happened with Dracula and everything, ravished by a foreigner and all that is, quite against your will, of course, but then people do so talk, don't they? That whole bit, I'm like, wow, knowing who she is now and rereading it knowing who she is added a whole other element of, wow, he's really being backhanded.
Yeah. He was a little scumbag, and he really just had a sleazy feel to him from that initially opening, of who he was, and just, you see him kind of like, I'd like to call you Wilhelmina, why didn't you? He's like, Miss Murray will do just fine. And I was like, oh, nice little slam back at him. But the thing that got me with, has me thinking with Mina is I really wonder what everything led to her with her and Jonathan's divorce, because it's not just as cut and dry as we're seeing it. Because that's one of the things I want to go forward to see if they go more details into the divorce, because the way I always read Stoker's Dracula is that Jonathan Harker is so in love with Mina that he would accept her, no matter what happened. And it had to have been her walking away from him, her separating herself from him for his safety, and not him kicking her out. And I that's the part I want to find out if I'm true on that, or if there's something else going on here that I'm completely missing. Because with the movie, the thing I thought was so cool about the movie was I always felt that Jonathan was dead in the movie, and I'm like, okay, that makes sense. That's the only way you're going to get Jonathan, Mina without Jonathan by her side, is he's dead.
I always wondered, did she kill him? In her bloodlust, meaning that she couldn't control herself, because you read stories about that, or. And I'm not saying that I was set on that possibility, because your first possibility was something that always resonated with me. Would he leave her for anything? But then he never dealt with the fact, like, how do you deal with your wife is a vampire? Your wife has these needs. Your wife needs to feed. Those are things that are a part of her, which is, it's an interesting thing, because it's a character that I would love to read more of, Mina Harker, because I think the film dealt with a lot more of those elements early on. So I think I got a different impression of her from the film than I did here, because we're really left with a very vague knowledge of who she is in the early parts of this miniseries.
Yeah.
So it was interesting to see that the film took it in a much more in-your-face direction than the comic did. And I don't know that I prefer either interpretation of it. If in many ways they're kind of a cool companion piece, because they make you think of the character. Each one makes you think of the character a little bit differently and adds a different layer to her. I actually it's funny, the more that we talk about this, the more I like that the film was a little bit different, because you know a little bit more, I think, about certain characters from each version of the story.
And the one thing I really did enjoy about the book over the movie, was the fact that Mina was such a strong female character in the book. She's the leader of this team. Quartermain is not the leader. And I thought that was a kind of a neat thing that I would have liked to have seen in the movie, but I understand why they didn't go with it. I understand why, of course, you got Sean Connery, so you're going to put him in the lead just because of name recognition, but also his presence and his playing off of with Tom Sawyer. That was some really cool stuff that you really needed that. And it's, again, a different direction for the team. Understand why they went with it, but that's something I'm really appreciating in the book, is that Mina's the leader of this team, and you're seeing a strong, confident woman who dealt with a pretty nasty guy, and she's got some scars from it, but you know what? She's dealing with it and she's moving forward. And I really do like seeing her, in this leadership role, but also in this, standoffish, hey, I'm not going to tell you any details, and if you're a gentleman, you won't ask type of style that she's throwing out there. I really like seeing that.
Well, what I loved is, with everything she went through, seeing her step up and take the leadership role in this. Because I agree with you 110%. Amen. That's one of the things that I really dug about this, was seeing her, be that leader, be that person that, would be able to do all these things. Because Campion's sending her on this mission to find all of these people who really have their own set of problems and issues to deal with. A lot of these guys are at latter points of their life. A lot of them, I should say. Jekyll's got a whole, we'll get to Jekyll when we start talking about him, because that's a whole other conversation. But I'm talking about, like, Captain Nemo and Quartermain in this story in particular are two old soldiers, who've done right, who've done wrong, who've got hurt and heartache. There's something for them to connect over as the storyline goes on, but you can see why the two of them, are a little bit broken when she discovers them. I liked her being the glue that was holding the team together early on, like her having to figure out the little tiny tidbits to keep this team together, this team of misfits. I like teams of misfits. It's kind of fun to see them. Why was Secret Six one of my favorite books? Because they're teams of misfits that you wonder how they wound up together, but then as a few issues go on, you can't imagine them being apart. This team had that feel for me. It was in the beginning, I'm like, what are they? It's like the Island of Misfit Toys here. But then, like the Island of Misfit Toys, by the end of it, you really believe that these characters belong together and that they together are much greater than they were, than their legends even were when they were apart. And it was interesting. And I love the idea that how much of the legends are actually true and how much of them are legends. That was brought up thematically in both the film and in this. Did they actually do these things? And to a certain extent, part of me thinks, yes, they actually did do those things, but then there's that humble part of them that's saying that that's not the whole story. You're looking at my legend, but you're ignoring the fact that there are people that died along the way, and that these scars would, be something that would wear me down over time. Sean Connery played that very well in the film. And I thought that was something that thematically echoes right back into the comic book, that these are characters who are scarred by their experiences. So, yes, their legends are true, but they don't tell the whole story. And this is kind of did a great job of expanding upon, like, what happened afterwards? How do these things affect these people? We had these great stories with them, but there would be consequences to these things, and they would affect their lives, and they wouldn't necessarily go, we always think of these legendary characters riding off into the sunset, and, well, what happens when you get to the other side on the sunset, when that sun goes down? And it does go down, and you got to get up the next day. And that's something that I thought that was interesting in the exploration of this. Can these characters pull up their boots again and do something more?
Well, when Mina first goes to Cairo to get Alan, that I honestly, I have to say, I was really shocked by the sequencing, seeing him just completely stoned out of his mind on opium, and everything she's going through, where she's getting there. It's like, you're Alan Quartermain, you can't be like this. And I'm kind of thinking that as well, because the Alan Quartermain I know was Sean Connery in the movie, who, he was reluctant, but he still wasn't some junkie. He was Alan Quartermain. He had the style and the swagger still, and this dude's barely able to stand. And it was something that I was like, wow. And that was, kind of a shock slap in the face. And then it continues on with the locals starting to attack her. And the whole time I'm thinking, I'm like, is she not a vampire? Is that something else that changed in the comic that's in the movie? Is that another difference? Because, she's sitting there saying, stop right now. Then Quartermain jumps in and, it actually, helps her out. And then, we get a pretty cool fight sequence going on there. But that was something that really just kind of like, wow, this is a dramatic difference than where I'm at. Okay, I can see why people are saying it's different. There is something here.
See, in my exposure to Quartermain was the 85 movie with Richard Chamberlain.
Yeah.
So, I kept seeing that character, and I'm like, whoa, wait a minute, what? I saw Alan Quartermain. I was all excited because, the Richard Chamberlain movie was a good afternoon popcorn flick. In 85, I was, I had been like sophomore in high school. That was a film that was out at that time. I saw it with some friends. It was a good popcorn flick. It was exactly what it was, with the Indiana Jones thing going on and stuff like that. It was that kind of themed adventure film. So I really dug it. Then seeing this character in this spot, and I love though that he's in this spot because of the adventures he went through.
Yeah.
That's something that really worked for me there. And I love how she's questioning him as we're going through, like, why am I seeking this guy out? What does he bring to the table? She's making him even, she's saying, I don't see it. I don't get it. And that was, I would be questioning the same thing. That was the kind of honesty. I love that they didn't instantly all of a sudden bond.
Yeah.
I did like that he had kind of a thing for her, as the story was going on. Like, there was this, like, echoes and undertones of, like, that he had a thing for her, but then he was repulsed by her. And then there was, there was all different kinds of emotions going on with the characters throughout this. And this is a guy, she's seen him at his absolute worst. I mean, to be addicted to opium because of his travels is something that, would take him to some very dark places. And his view of people and his relationships, he would be somebody that couldn't be trusted, and he would know that people would be constantly questioning him, so there'd be a paranoia. He would be questioning himself. And I love that was played out in all this. The addiction and the effect of addiction on him, there was nothing glorified about it in this whole thing. And I love that anytime he did that, he was like the kid caught, pulling out of the candy jar. And just the shame on his face and things. That was something that really grabbed me. I liked that it wasn't glorified. It wasn't meant to be. It was something that was meant to be cool. You really saw how this had put him into a very dark place. And I kept wondering, is it going to be possible for him to ever fully pull himself out of that?
Yeah, that was something that I like seeing, just the hero that's in there coming out. And it's something that was gradual throughout this whole thing, and even near the end there, he still had some weaker moments, but there's still Quartermain. He is still this Alan Quartermain. He is still this man's man, this great hunter, this adventurer. God save the Queen and whatnot. So I like seeing that hero come out in him, and these early sequences, just were some great stuff with him. Where he basically kills the first guy, and then he's overtaken because he's got no strength in him by the second one. But Mina steps up with the knife to the back, and as they're running away, he's like, "Hey, I'm sick, I'm tired." She's like, "Run now, come on, you idiot, keep moving," and she's pushing him along. And just when I talked about my art issues and that art stuff, that how I had to get over it, the scene that really saved me and got me into this art was the look on his face when he first sees the Nautilus.
Yeah.
That right there, where he's just like, is it the opium, or do you see this as well? And there's that sheer shock and just look of shock and awe. And then I flip the page and I see the Nautilus there. I was like, oh, that is cool. Right there at that point in time, I was all in on the art. Then it was funny because then I went back and redid the opium scenes, and I like seeing how, because he's in such a drug-induced haze, there's the difference with the coloring and just some of the artwork, and everything was a little bit fuzzy and tweaky and goofy because of his mental state. And I was like, oh, okay, this is nice. I like how they're incorporating the character. We're getting our view of his, what he's seeing in life.
One of the things that's been interesting in the years that I've worked with you on this show, and I love finding that spot where you click with an artist, because I think what it really is deep down is, before you can enjoy art, you need to connect with the artist's voice. And I think that really seems to be like an ongoing theme with you, where you'll sit there and say, I just really, I had trouble with the art, couldn't get into the art. And I think it really is just a need to be able to understand the kind of storytelling, not just the dialogue, because, you always say, like, I'm more of a writer's guy, that type of thing. But I think it is trying to find the same voice that you find in the writing in the art. And I think when you eventually hit that scene that connects you with the artist, that's where you kind of go back. I went back I checked out the pages and I saw this. And I mean, I hear it in your voice, like where you're like, oh, this is it. This is where I clicked. I got it. Right here. And I actually really enjoy that, because I think that's a really important parts about reading comics is connecting with the dialogue, connecting with the voice of the artist, because I think the symbiotic relationship between the two is what makes comics work. So I think it's true with film and everything. I think if you're not connecting with the visual, but you're connecting with the dialogue the actor's doing in a film, you're going to have a problem with the film. I think you have the same issues with comics. Not you in particular. I'm saying anybody would. If you're not connecting with all elements that are putting together the product that we're dealing with. That Nautilus is gorgeous.
Oh yeah. Oh, big time, dude. And it's, you got to get your groove going on any comic. You got to get your feel and your flavor to it. And it's one of the things I like about reading trades is that it does give me multiple boom, boom, boom in a row that, if it takes me a little while to get the feeling, I have a couple issues and I don't have to wait.
Single issues give me the rumpa-pum-pum. So, just saying.
Rum pum pum pum.
Yeah,
Rum pum pum.
You're like, I don't think I like about trades. They give me the boom. They give me the multiple boom boom boom.
Okay.
So I'm just saying, I like single issues because they give me rum pum pum pum.
Okay,
which sounds a little more fun. Just saying. Yay floppies. One of the things I liked about the miniseries in particular was Mina starting to have issues with the fact that she doesn't know she wasn't given, speaking of the fact that the third volume is the dossier, she wasn't given enough information about who the people were that she was going to be collecting. This Nautilus showing up was as much a surprise to her as it was to him, she was actually apologizing to him that, they're both going to die.
Yeah.
Having no idea that this was what was going to be showing up there. Captain Nemo's first appearance was one of my favorite moments of the first issue. That harpoon gun that he pulled out. I know we saw a harpoon gun from the Phantom villain, who turned out to be Moriarty in the film. Right. I know we got to see that in the film, but it was, to me, this is an example of where I liked it in the comic much better than the film, because to see the good guy just come out and he's talking, and these guys are all talking in foreign language at this point. He walks out just very calmly, very casually, pulls out the harpoon gun, fires it, and you see some guy flying into another guy, then they're flying all over the place. It was just enough of a distraction for him to close the door and salute, and off they go. I mean, it was just everything about the pacing of that moment visually just was, to me, it was a cool high five action moment. It reminded me of everything I like about action films in general. And yet it had humor, it had, just every little bit of pacing that I really enjoyed. And that was something, kudos to both the script and how it was delivered in the art, because that was something I was like, wow. Yeah. and it holds up.
And nothing takes the wind out of someone's sails like seeing your two buddies fly, 50 feet behind you with a giant harpoon sticking in their chest. Yeah, I think that right there, I'd be like, I'm done fighting. You guys go, have a nice life. I'm not messing with you on that one.
The Alan Quartermain, when he's up there, and Nemo's reluctance to say who he is. That was something I enjoyed about both variations of the film. Was Nemo being the pirate in the film. And that reference by Quartermain being something that, was rude and stuck into him. But then Nemo having to come back later in the film and tell Quartermain that, yes, I am this pirate guy. And that was probably the hard part about the whole thing, is that is a part of my past. And that's something that's, he was implying that was something that was hard for him to deal with. And the two of them bonding over their own skeletons of the past. Quartermain, what was going on in the film with his son. And the fact that he'd lost not just his son, but also many comrades. Nemo obviously having other issues with loss and also choices that he'd made in the past. I liked seeing that in the comic, the way that it played out, because so much was told in just two panels where we see, Nemo basically telling Quartermain, hey, I got medicine here that can help you. I have my own, not medicine, but my own remedies to this type of situation, which I have a funny feeling it's, he's not going to give him a little injection or something to help him with this type of thing. But his reluctance to tell him who he is, almost a shame to revealing that he's Captain Nemo. I love 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea. So for me, I'm always giddy to see these classic characters brought in. And that was one of the things I loved about this team up. They were characters I never expected to see together. And that was I thought was kind of a unique nature of this whole thing. It kind of it made me feel like I felt when I first read Watchmen. Because that was another. There were characters that were fresh to me in Watchmen, because they were while they were nods to certain characters from comics past. They were fresh characters. This had a fresh character feel because these were characters in roles we'd never seen them in. This was much later in their life. This is like him doing what he did with Watchmen with these type of characters, and I really enjoyed it.
Oh, big time. Yeah, and it's funny because I really had no idea who Quartermain was. As I said, the movie was my introduction and only knowledge of him. And Nemo, I've never read the actual book. I've seen variations of the movies and actually not even sat down from start to finish. I've seen parts here. So I kind of know who the character is. So he's another one that, the movie, League, the League movie was really a good, solid introduction for me on the character as well. So these are, again, two characters that I don't know much about, and had I not seen the movie, had I not read the book, I would never have said, "Oh, this should be an interesting story." Seeing Alan Quartermain and Captain Nemo, Invisible Man, Jekyll and Hyde, and you throwing these characters together, I never would have thought that they would be interesting, just because they're so different and so variation. I couldn't see them working together. I couldn't see how a story could be crafted, but when you sit down and see it, you're like, oh, dang, this is nice, especially because you have all the regular, traditional, other literary references being thrown into it that I found myself, as I was reading it, I'm jumping online going, okay, I know that's so-and-so. Oh, yeah, okay, yeah. And I was verifying stuff, looking up stuff that I had no idea on. And it was kind of a neat little experience going beyond what the pages are saying because I want to know the backstory on them.
You know, I'm a big classic Disney fan, and the original 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea, the Disney version, I should say, with Captain Nemo. It was one of the things that struck me about Captain Nemo was his obsession. You know, his obsession to go on his quest, his obsession to accomplish his goals, at the risk of everybody else, the peril of everybody else. You know, the driven man. And to see him here in this, it really did. I felt very comfortable that this was the same character from then. You know, dealing with looking at his past, looking at his life, looking at his accomplishments, but also seeing what he did to achieve those goals. And knowing that what we saw in 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea isn't the only thing that this guy has been through was something that I thought was very well handled in this. I liked this book because one of the things that I enjoyed was no matter what your exposure was to these characters, there was a connection point to them. You know, whether it was I knew them prior to reading this or I got to know them after reading this, I really felt that strong connection point to the characters. So I thought that was something that, like, this time around, I know more. I've actually read Bram Stoker's book. I saw the movie, the Dracula, the Gary Oldman movie. So I was a lot more familiar with Mina Harker this time around than I was the first time I read League of Extraordinary Gentlemen. So it's very different having read Bram Stoker's book and knowing some of the history of what this character went through and seeing that. But I really loved that, you know, now it's got a whole new twist for me, and I was more focused on her this time. Because the other two characters I had known from previous versions of them. The Invisible Man I had known from the movie. Did you see the original black and white Invisible Man movie?
I've seen multiple versions of the Invisible Man movie, that Sci-Fi Channel series that they had, Invisible Man, where they even tweaked it some more. You know, yeah, I've seen variations of the Invisible Man. I actually do enjoy the character, and I like when they kind of have a little bit of the psychotic nature that the being invisible would cause for him, and some of the other, you know, variations of it where it's a little bit difficult to be the Invisible Man because, you know, just, you know, one, the nature of, you know, if you're invisible, you can't close your eyelids to go to sleep because they're invisible, so you're constantly getting light bombarded into you. And, you know, just the other little twerks and little, you know, problems that it would take to, you know, being invisible and just kind of what he goes through. I like the character. I like the concept. And when they brought him into this, I was like, wow, this is a really evil, sadistic person. So I like the fact that throwing him into the mix as well.
You know, one of the things where they were talking about Paris in late June 1898, and we get to see, I loved Kevin O'Neill's backgrounds. You know, just seeing the amount of details, it kind of added a whole pulpy feel to this whole thing. You know, as the characters were going through, and to me, I wanted to get a time placement, a sense of scenery, a sense of where they were. One of the other things I appreciated in those early pages, too, is when we see Quartermain all cleaned up, there's still, for him, visually, and this is something I thought that was really spectacular. I love when I see emotion in the way a character's drawn. And I really felt like he looked great, you know, looked like he was all cleaned up and everything, yet there was a lack of confidence in him, in the way he was carrying himself. Like, I got that this is somebody who had, like, if this had been my first exposure to the character, not seeing him the way we'd seen him in the previous pages, I would still get the vibe that this is a character who's going through something.
Yeah.
If you get what I'm saying, you're like, he's got an issue still. And I like that. I thought that was something that was very important to show in the art.
Well, you can't shake that off immediately. And that's the fact that they're showing a slow progression, showing through time that it's taking for him to kick the habit, but he's not even really kicking the habit. He's just getting through the detox right now. And you talk about just background details. That was just so cool, just looking at all the various detail they went into. And then when they meet up with Dupin from Poe's Murder in the Rue Morgue, I was like, I didn't know who that was initially, but then as they take it to the Rue Morgue, I'm like, oh my God. And then they tell the story of the backstory. I'm like, that's actually so. And it was one of those things where I jumped online quickly, like, okay, yeah, that is the actual inspector who was from the story. I was like, that is awesome. And again, it was one of those kind of moments where that really pulled me more into the book, knowing that he is doing, just going beyond these literary characters. He's introducing other literary characters. He's bringing in other people and just making them in the background. And I was just like, wow, this is a great thing. It was something for me that was just, they threw it out there. If you never read the story, you didn't need to read the story. They told you exactly who he was. But because I read the story, because I had read the original work, I was like, oh, this is nice.
I'm a big Poe fan too, which is it was nice that he did that. This felt like a big love letter to classic literature. In many ways, you could see what a lot of these stories were that Moore obviously was drawn to and captivated by, and that would be what would make these characters fit into what he wanted to do with League. So it's very clear to me that he actually read these books, read them multiple times. Really has a fondness and a love for the original tales. And I think that's something that's really neat for a creator to get an opportunity to utilize characters like that in a new fashion. Let the characters... I think that's something in comics that is great about creating a legacy with characters you create. And I think it's great that in literature, these literary characters have a legacy now in this, where they've gone beyond their original books. They have a legacy in League of Extraordinary Gentlemen. I think great characters that have been well produced and well put together, whether it's comics, film, literature, wherever, sometimes take a life of their own on, and their story evolves. They head into a new direction. Sometimes it's expected by the original author, where they kind of see an end game for their character, see a direction their characters can go in. Other times, the character kind of tells their own story. And it's fun to see that happen in League of Extraordinary Gentlemen, to see some of these characters kind of evolve into their own kind of story. I love when Mina has to dress up in order to be kind of a bait, because they're trying to trap Hyde, and not knowing what was going to happen with all this. But I loved we again see the weakness. You can't leave Quartermain alone, especially near a pharmacy.
You guys get some laudanum.
Yeah. Now, it was cool how that played in later into the story. If Dupin hadn't caught him at the time, that whole story would have gone down very differently. Because Dupin caught him, he still had that in play to use later with Hyde. And I so totally knew what happened was that Mina ran into Jekyll first, and that Hyde was coming. But I loved how that visually played out, because you can see her shock. And that was something that I thought was great in this whole thing. We don't get to see the change in that point. She saw it. I love that we talk about how we love like a Hitchcock setup at times like that, where what you don't see on camera is a lot more interesting. In my mind, I was trying to play through what she saw when we eventually see Hyde pop through. Like, what did she see? How did the change look like? What did it look like for her? In the film, we just see it right away. And the film had that like kind of horrifying change that occurred right away. I liked how it played out in this with the cliffhanger, where we don't know what change was seen. I like Edward's first appearance in this one. It was the good first issue had some excellent pacing in this book.
And I did, with Quartermain, with him getting the laudanum, when Dubin just calls him out on it, and you can kind of see again. You talk about that shame, and he's like, as he plugs the bottle back up because he didn't, take a hit from it. But you could see just, that this, kind of self-loathing. He initially tries to make an offense, but then he quickly backs down because he knows he's wrong. And when they went to track down where she went, I like that we got to see the investigation process. We got to see him tracking down, talking with locals, trying to figure out where she went. It wasn't just an assumed, where she was. It kind of added to the mystery, but it also, again, it was another homage to, the detective prowess of Dupin, and just kind of, it was another nod of to Poe's work, because that was one of the. I think one of the early, if not one of the first, really kind of detective stories where you really see the detective processing going on, where you see him lay out what he, the evidence and where he got it and how he came about. Just what's in modern day storytelling when the hero finally reveals everything. In Murder, if I'm not mistaken, and people, please feel free to correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm pretty sure Murder in the Rue Morgue was one of the first times when we got that style of literature, and it's like kind of like the dawn and the beginning of the what we see in like the Sherlock Holmes stories and Mark I can't think of the other famous French guy right now, but you get that same kind of like great detective styling. That was the first story, so I was glad to see some of that character's traits get portrayed in this.
Jim, I read the single issues again, and I got you the trade. Did the trade have the ads at the end of each issue, or where were the ads? Did you have the ads? Like the ads for Ladies Improved Eyeglasses, Carter's Little Liver Pills, Pattison Whiskey, stuff like that. Did that have it anywhere in their trade?
Not that I'm aware of, unless it's...
The end of each single issue, when the series was originally published, had like Learn to Hypnotize, all the little ads that Charles Atlas. They didn't have the Charles Atlas one, but they had those type of ads like we had as kids. But they had like Reist's patent invigorator belt. Where you see two. I'll have to show you them because it's really cool if they aren't in the trade to see those little ads. I thought it was something that set a tone for the time that this series was taking place. Which was the point of the ads. Then there'd be a little nod to like things like Tom Strong and stuff like that, some of the other books that were being published as a part of this America's Best line. But the ads were something that I truly enjoyed in reading the single issues as the series came out.
At the very back they have some of them. I don't think they have them all though, but they did have that invigorating belt.
Yeah.
So the guy getting zapped. So they did have that one in there, but I don't know. It doesn't look like they have them all.
The covers were something that's interesting. Like issue 2, I'm looking at the cover of issue 2, and it shows the main characters, at different periods of their lives. Like Captain Nemo in 1867, you get to see Alan Quatermain when he was younger, in 1888, on some of his adventures. But then they show like later years for like Mina Murray, and it's closer to this. But then Jekyll and Hyde during their early appearances, seeing Hyde stepping on, I'm guessing, was it a woman? I don't know.
Little lady.
Yeah, what he's doing there. First I thought it was a doll, then I'm like, no, that's not a doll. That's got to be the real, because of what we know. He's a Campion Bond when he was much younger in 1888. Dupin, again, back to his early years. And then I love Hawley Griffin's in 1897. There's just a desk. We know he's there somewhere, but we can't see him. It just is a great, the way that was handled in that series. And then we jump right back into the sequence with Hyde. I love that when he gets shot in the ear, when he changes back, that was something that Jekyll has to deal with in shock. Because, of the dual personalities. It would be something that Jekyll wouldn't be aware of when and how it happened. And that duality was something that you knew that they were the same man and personality traits of the same man, yet he had so accepted that they were separate entities. You got to wonder if subconsciously Jekyll knew everything that Hyde did. Because I believe in the storyline of Jekyll and Hyde, didn't Jekyll eventually start to know everything that Hyde did, or am I wrong? I don't know how much you know about Jekyll and Hyde. I remember seeing the film years ago, the original Jekyll and Hyde film, but I don't know.
Yeah, I don't think he ever did. I thought it was always a shock to him, waking up, from a nightmare, and it's, where am I now? What's going on? I thought there wasn't any, but again, it's been so long since I've read the original Jekyll and Hyde work that I have no idea if there was any memories or dealings with that. Now, the League movie, I like the fact that there was somewhat of a connection between the two, and there was a memory. And I thought that was a cool, just dealings with the character. It kind of showed, again, an age on Jekyll and Hyde that maybe these two could work together. Maybe they could. But in the movie, Jekyll was very, even when Hyde saved the day and the Nautilus was drowning and Hyde's the only one who could save him, afterwards everyone's good job. He's like, hey, don't praise him. Who knows what he'll do next time? He had a very realistic attitude towards what exactly, Jekyll and Hyde, what Hyde would do. So I thought that was another neat usage of the duality of the character. And we kind of see that somewhat because they comment later that you can, in a way, reason with Hyde and you can deal with Hyde, but you got to be careful how you word things, how you, express, what you want done with him.
Now, the movie and the comic had a different way of capturing Hyde in the way that, Quatermain was a lot more with it in the film, with him being the leader. So they created like a clever trap where Quatermain was leading him to a trap I actually preferred the comic book handling of it. I think maybe because this could be because too the comic was my first exposure to all this. I liked how awkward the whole thing was. Like everything was spur of the moment. Trying to survive. The shoving of the bottle into his mouth was just a desperation kind of thing. A lot of this stuff was very accidental. His falling out the window, things like that, was all accidental. And then they had to use contacts to find a way to get this guy on a cart and then into the Nautilus. I liked that. To me, it was sometimes in stories things are a little too clean, and I like when things are a little messy. There's something more realistic about that. Like, how would you know, given the little information they were given, how would you know how to deal with him?
See, in the movie, it seemed like they had more information, and that's something I did like about the book more, that they were improvising, adapting, overcoming a situation. They didn't have all the stories. And I like the fact that when Mina is writing her correspondence with Bond saying, hey, you're not telling me everything, that's going on here. You're holding back some vital information that I need to know. You knew what we were up against, yet you didn't tell us that this guy is this shape-changing monster. You knew what a bad, in a bad way, Quartermain was, and you didn't tell me. I needed to know that. And I thought that was, again, another cool difference between the two, where, as you said, the movie was a lot cleaner, a lot boom, 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 planned out. The movie was improvise, adapt, and overcome. And I do think I probably enjoyed that a little bit better, especially because the follow-up beyond that, Mina's making reference to him saying, hey, if we're going to do this for you, you got to give me more information. And again, it's another strong leadership, role that she's taking in it that I was like, damn, this is kind of cool. I like this.
I think you meant that the comic was improvise, adapt, and overcome.
Right.
You said the movie both times.
Oh. Sorry.
No, it's okay. No, I mean, I'm not. I'm only correcting you just to clarify because I think you're making an excellent point there, and I 100% agree with you.
Yeah.
I think the movie was very consistent with the movie, though, so I don't want to put that I'm knocking the movie there because it was funny this time around. I think it was watching the movie, I think with fresh eyes. I really walked in open-minded. I'm like, I haven't seen the movie ever fully from start to finish. I've seen the whole film, but not really the way it was meant to be watched. And I walked in with biases. I knew that. So I'm like, let me watch it with a fresh pair of eyes. And especially because you influenced a lot the way I watched the film this time. Because when you and I had a discussion about League of Extraordinary Gentlemen, you mentioned how much you liked the film. And I'm like, wow. I'm like, maybe I should go watch this again and see because I greatly respect your opinion. So I went back through and I watched it, and I walked in with a real open mind to see it, and I really enjoyed the film. And a lot of the tone differences in the film are because of the different roles of the character. Putting Quartermain as the lead drastically changes his role and how he needs to behave in the film, and I thought the film was very consistent with its use of Quartermain. I have my own preferences. I do prefer the comic to the film. I think it's because the comic was my first exposure, so that's kind of the way I see these characters. But the film I found to be very enjoyable and a very worthy story. It actually, this time around, I think being so open to the film in some levels helped me think of the characters in the comic in a different way. Like, helped expand my understanding of the characters, if that makes sense, because it did reveal certain things about the characters much earlier than the comic did. So I think when I read the comic through this time after seeing the film again, because I read it like 3 times to prepare for the show, and the most recent time that I read the initial 3 issues to prepare for this was after I saw the film. And it really did influence some of my viewpoints on the character, especially Mina. Knowing what we know about Mina from the film and then reading this again, really, like, my respect level for her shot up. I'm like, oh my gosh, this is what this woman's going through? And yet she's still running the team? Be a little upset, too. Dupin was fantastic. At the end of this sequence where she's trusted him at this point in time, and she's ready to open up to him saying, I am divorced and have resumed my maiden name. There are certain events. He reveals right away that... I read a lot. It cuts her off because he doesn't want to put her through that torture. There was something I found endearing about him in that moment. Being this classy inspector by the book, it's clear that he takes his job seriously. I'm a big fan of detectives and police work because I believe there's a lot of people who really look at that job as a calling. They put themselves on the line. And when you see a character like this Dupin, really reminding us of, like, framework-wise, what that really means. He reminds me of what I like about characters like Jim Gordon. The people who are trying to, really make a difference with what they do. And I love that he saw the tragedy and what she went through. Like, one panel said so much to me about this character. I was like, yeah, man, he's an all right dude. I wanted to see more of Dupin. Like, I want to follow the further adventures of Dupin. This is a police officer I can get behind. And there was something about that moment that I thought just really struck me. I don't know why it was this time that it really struck me, but in my most recent read-through, I really enjoyed seeing his closure with Mina in those sequences, because he could have been, quite the creep with it.
And the fact that he is retired, and he came out of retirement for this case. Once these prostitutes started getting killed by Hyde, that's what pulled him out, especially because he knew the one. And he's like, you know what? She's lived a hard life, but she didn't deserve that fate. So that's another cool moment that I thought was a good cop moment from him, that this is a guy who, as you said, this isn't just a job to him, this is a calling. He's one of the good guys who does it to bring down the bad guys. It's not just, hey, it's a good way to make a living. It's, whatever reason. There's multiple reasons out there why people, pursue law enforcement. For him, it's about the job. It's about doing what's right. It's about taking down the bad guys. And I like seeing, cops like that. And, Gordon's always a great example of that. And there's so many other ones in, just various classic literature and TVs and movies where you get those moments where you see them knuckle up and okay, they're doing this not for glory, not for fame. They're doing it because it's the right thing to do. And, those are the ones that you're like, yeah, that's the cop I want.
Yeah, then jumping into the letter from her, I'm a big fan of internal dialogue with characters, and I think you've got to use it at the right times. This letter was, you figure we're in the second issue at this point. Now we're really getting into her head and seeing how she feels about the whole mission. She's taking issue at this point with the lack of knowledge, like you mentioned. I loved seeing, like, this is where the art really worked. Jekyll's reaction to his ear was, I thought, something so visually. Not only the shock that his ear's been blown off, but now he's got to have his ear sewn up. He's really waking up. I always took Jekyll and Hyde as waking up from a bad dream. That's why for me, my theory was always with Jekyll and Hyde that deep down he always knew what he did, but it was, like any dream, you don't expect to wake up and that actually be your reality, that those things actually happened. He would see newspaper articles, he would, see pamphlets, he would see people hunting him down, all that kind of hunting Hyde down, is what I'm saying. Which really is him, and see that those things really did happen, but there was a subconscious part of him that was aware that they happened, like a foggy dream. And that was something that, seeing the shock and awe, I think that would increase that all the more to realize this wasn't this wasn't a fantasy. It happened in some reality. Then there'd be that denial that goes along with that, where you don't let yourself accept that and you would hide and bury that. And some of that might be me overstretching, but I like when there's characters that make me kind of stretch beyond what is actually shown to us. So a lot of this is me kind of editorializing what my own viewpoint was on Jekyll and Hyde. But that was all the more of what I enjoyed about having him here, because I remember I'm a big fan of classic black and white films, and I remember seeing the classic Jekyll and Hyde, and that was always kind of the subtext that I really enjoyed with the film, was that, you were left to kind of interpret what he really knew and what he didn't. And it was something I always appreciated by it. And I loved that this story never took any of that away from me. I could still interpret it the way I wanted to. And I think that comes from the fact that the creative team nailed these characters to their core of what they really were all about in the classic literature.
And it's funny because just how cool is it the fact that Dupin shoots him in the face and it just really just blows off his ear. It doesn't really kill him or stop him. And then later on you get him dealing with the shock and horror. And then again later on, as he's, we always see that ear is covered up when he's in, when he's in Jekyll mode. He always has the bandage over it. He's always covering up the disfigurement, while when he's in Hyde mode, it just, sitting there flapping in the wind. It's nothing to hide. But to Jekyll, even though it's no longer bleeding, it's no longer, nasty, he still is going to cover it up because that's proper gentleman. It's, it's the way he is. And I always like seeing those little artistic things where, as Jekyll mode, he's got the covering. As Hyde mode, it's whatever it is, and that for me was another just cool kind of art sequencings.
One of the other things that I thought was a good use that Alan Moore did was having Mina constantly throw out her assumptions that it was Mycroft Holmes that was M. That was one of those things that it really fooled me through multiple read-throughs, where I guess I was journeying so much with the League that I never saw the possibility that it was, because I guess I was always assuming that other than Mina, other people were verifying that, meaning that Campion actually verified that was the case. He never does. He never verifies the identity. And it was something this time through, I really found myself reading that, and I'm like, he always refers to him as Mr. M.
Yeah.
Never goes any further with that. And it's really always Mina that's referring to him as Mycroft. That's her assumption on who it is. And I love that it didn't turn out to be true, what she was thinking. But it struck me this time like, wow, I've been letting her snow me all along in this because I've been journeying with her. I never made the connection. I mean, I knew through multiple read-throughs what actually happens with M and who M turns out to be. But I never registered to me that the reason why I keep getting fooled is because I'm letting myself continue following along on that side of the journey.
Oh, yeah, and it was funny because in the movie, I knew that that M that they introduced and their main guy is the bad guy. I knew that there was something just creepy and wrong about him. I'm like, there's a swerve here, but I never knew that it was Moriarty. And just like going into the comic, I knew who it was, so I was like, oh, that's kind of neat. Had this been my first exposure, I would be completely hook, line, and sinker along with Mina, thinking that M was Mycroft, Holmes, and that it was Bond who was going to do the double cross. I always felt something was funky going on here, and it had that great feel that you always would not completely trust him. So in my head, I know if I was reading this for the first time, I'd be thinking, okay, M, Mycroft Holmes, that's a good guy. This Bond is going to be the bad guy. That's going to be where the double cross is. And I really liked the fact that they kept playing it out, and just the way Bond was answering him, saying, any assumptions you make, that's your assumption to make. But stop asking about the identity of Mr. M. He is Mr. M. And that, again, it also has a nice kind of government spy agency type of feel to it, where you don't have no real names, no first names, just initials, just maybe a last name. Again, adding to the whole MI5, spy type of governmental agency, story. And I thought that was, again, another add-on, nice little extra kind of cool moments.
Now, Sherlock, the death that they talk about of the classic detective, the great detective, was that meant to be the death of Sherlock Holmes? Or
Yes.
am I reading too much into that?
No, that was definitely Sherlock Holmes.
Because I know that I was looking it up and looking through the history of the character, and I know at one point in time Doyle actually did kill off Holmes because he no longer wanted to write the character. And I thought that's what was being referred to there as, they were talking about the change that was going on in England and how dark it had gotten, and Bond and Murray are talking as they're walking along. And I always took that to be Sherlock Holmes. I didn't know if you read that the same way.
Oh, exactly the same way. And I kind of liked it, the way he's even explaining what they're doing and why they're doing it, adding even further into getting her to think that it is, that it's Mycroft, bringing up the great detective, bringing up Holmes. And he wasn't encouraging her, he didn't tell her, but in a way you can kind of see the little games he was playing just to make sure keep her off, off foot and keep her off kilter. And I like the fact that when she walks past the one public house, Prospect of Whitby, that she is paused and she is thrown for a loop, and she's like, oh, there's past here, and she doesn't really go into it that she's distracted by it, but in the Dracula novel, that's where the boat, because it's a public house right on the bank of the Thames, and that's where the ship runs ashore that's got Dracula in it. So there is she has a connection to that, tavern, bar, whatever you want to call it. And I like the fact, again, throwing a little bit more stuff in there. If you know the Dracula story, if you know her story, it's a nice little clue, because we still, at this point in time, really don't know that it's Mina Harker. We just know Mina Murray, a divorced female. You don't know her full story. Kind of another little, tease and or clue as to her identity. I thought that was a cool just way to bring it in.
For anybody listening to this right now, if you're not familiar with any of the films or classic literature, because a lot of the film adaptations of the classic literature borrow heavily from the original novels, so a lot of these things that we're talking about are touched on. And in some film cases, they expand upon the literature, so it's worth visiting a variety of media on these characters. But it's worth watching some of those things and going back and rereading this. And even if you watch one of them, watch one of the Alan Quartermain movies and go watch this. Watch, a Dracula movie and come back and read this. And, it's worth doing those things because it adds a different way of reading the story. It adds a different level and different layer to reading this story. Because over the years since I read this miniseries when it first came out. And I hadn't read or watched as much with each of these characters as I have since then. I've watched a lot of classic movies since then. I've read some classic books. I read Dracula since the time that I originally read this years ago. And it's funny how that added a whole new twist to this story. It added just something a little bit more. I was always familiar with the Dracula story. I knew who Mina Harker was from film, when I read this back in '99. But to see something more after having read the novel was something that was thrilling to me. It added to me another value to this story, so it was well worth it. I'd be curious if you ever watch or read any of the Quartermain stuff. You get a chance to go back and watch this again to see if it adds something new to you for this one, because it was something that I do recommend for anybody that gets to enjoy this. Now, when we're talking about Mr. Bond, and I love seeing the different characters' reactions to Bond, especially when it's collection of monsters and things like that. Seeing Nemo's discomfort, when he's looking at the paintings and you get to see the monsters in the background. Mm-hmm. So the Jekyll thing. Now, when they're talking about collecting monsters, do you think he was just referring to Jekyll, or do you take a look at what Alan Quartermain's become, Nemo's become, Mina Harker's become, Invisible Man? Where do you draw the line on what is and what isn't a monster? What is the League made of or comprised of?
He's seeing that Bond sees them all as monsters of various degrees, and I think that's part of Nemo's disgust and uncomfortableness with the fact that he is being labeled in with this group of monsters. And you know what? He's like, you can tell he's accepting of it because there is a way where he is a monster. They all have that dark side to him. It's not just Jekyll and Hyde. It's not just Griffin. It's not just it's they all are this creature. And it's kind of when you think about what he's been through, what he's dealt with. He's saying, okay, we all are a bit of a monsters. This is, they called it the menagerie earlier on. Well, now it's changing from a menagerie to more of a freak show. And, with his character, with his, his sense of honor and his sense of code, he's not a freak and he doesn't want to be perceived as one, but he's looking at his quote-unquote superiors and he's thinking, that's how they see me. This is not a good situation for me to be in. And it's part of his distrust for Bond that we later see, in the story. And I'm like, I thought that was a cool this is a good groundwork for why he does some of the stuff he does later on.
I love when they go to that academy, that correctional academy for wayward gentlewomen.
Yes.
Where Mina, again, has to, assume an identity. And, her and her husband, who is being played by Quartermain. I love the discomfort, too, the two of them. You think I like playing that Harpy's husband any better? Nemo's like, I don't like, being a manservant. And, both these characters just being discomforted by their particular roles that they're taking on at this point. But the deviance of that correctional institution, talking about how in that time there wasn't a code, and rules like we're used to today in educational institutions. There was a lot more of, as long as the institution was performing putting out results, people were pretty much letting anything that could happen in those places.
Well, here's an interesting thing, and this was one of and I completely had to look this up but when they first arrived at the site, she's talking about how I maintain the same standards as my predecessor, Miss Flabum. And as soon as I read that, I'm like, Miss Flabum has to be a character somewhere. And I jumped on the internet, did a couple Google searches, and she's this character in this story back in 1872. It's Lady Bum Tickler's Reveals, and it's a little bit more on the risque side story, and she's this character who's into the whips and chains and the beatings and all of that type of little perversions. And I thought that, for me, I was like, oh, that is cool. I had no idea who she was, and I was enjoying the story without knowing it, but just the way he's been pulling from other literature, I'm like, that name has to be something. And just like one of the teachers in there, Miss Carr, Katie Carr is a character that, while she's not she didn't, I don't think she was a deviant, but she kind of, what will Katie do next? What will she do next? And that's her catchphrase. Like, what will she do next? And in the actual, comic, she even has the line, oh, we don't know what she'll do next. And I was like, again, nice classic, references to other, literary stories of the time period. And I was like, man, this is neat. I like this.
This is a natural spot for the placement of the Invisible Man, because you've got somebody who, they did this to themselves. All they want now is a cure because they're transparent, which sounds all well and fine. I mean, how cool would it be to be able to go anywhere and do anything you want with no consequences? But then there is where is your sense of relationship building? Where is their sense of identity? Where is their sense of being known by others? You've completely given that up. I mean, you're transparent, which means you don't have a visual personality. It's amazing, how we all talk about our physical looks and things like that, and that's part of how people know us. We talk about, even with artistic visuals, how an artist drawing a character a certain way with their mood, their emotion, things like that, lets us visually see that. Well, this is somebody who no longer can be seen. They can be felt, they can be heard, but they can't be seen. Talk about you're being lost to so many people's visual senses. And how does that change your life and your role, your sense of isolation? So it goes and hides in this place, and that's where all these immaculate conceptions come from. The fact that this guy is doing these things, and it was an interesting twist for the story. You could see him being in this role.
Yeah, well, it's funny because when they first started talking about the assignment and just everything, I actually was referring to Griffin as Skinner, which is the name of the Invisible Man in the movie. But once we get to these sequences, once we see, what he's doing, I'm like, this ain't Skinner. This is really just a monster. And it was one of those really cool story elements that really let you know that this Invisible Man is a complete piece of garbage. He's not just a thief. He's not just there is something just wrong with him as a person. And it was kind of I was like, wow, really?
Did you see the original Invisible Man movie?
I've seen variations of the original. So I've never really seen the actual original Invisible Man. Okay. So I always seen stories where being invisible does affect you, does kind of make you a little touched in the head. So I understand that, part of it is the invisibility, but also part of it is just who this guy is. Oh, yeah. And I like seeing the fact that he's not a good person. This is a pretty nasty person who would, do what he's doing, but, and it goes beyond just, hey, having a little bit of fun here. No, he's a monster, in my opinion. He is probably, I would actually, in a way, make him more of a monster than, easily Nina. And Hyde has his moments, but Hyde also has his moments where you can see some level of character to him. A lot of times with Griffin, we really don't see the character. He's in it for himself. And he even talks about that, later on, that, hey, I'm in this for the only empire I'm interested in is the empire of the Invisible Man. I want a pardon and I want to be cured. That's all I care about. I don't care about anything else.
I liked the Nemo making the logic, saying, you will, of course, take the single room. She's the one woman, and there's the two guys, saying, let's, be fair about this. And the two, you got to wind up with the two of them. One of them's on the chair, and the other one's laid on the bed. That was just so classic. which totally fit Mina. I would have been in shock if it had gone the other way with Mina.
Yeah, that not going to happen, and just you think about it, just I was laughing when he made the suggestion, like, dude, really? This is your first time meeting her, right?
Mina with the paint, I thought was really well done, because another great strong female moment. You've got the two guys really trying to wrestle this Invisible Man character down, and her coming up with a logical, intelligent solution. Not just throwing the paint on him, but then using that to make him visible and knocking him out with the paint can. Mm-hmm. I agree with you totally on her being written as a strong female character, and something that I really dug about this. Because after everything she's been through, if in order to survive, she would have to be strong again. And I think that was something that really worked for me in all this. And it was something that the headmistress, or whatever you want to call her, of the place, like, noticed and, like, was almost basically offering her a role or a place at that academy.
She was hitting on Mina a little bit there. I think that was more than just a job offer. I think that was a little bit more that she was kind of interested, like, hey, I like your style. All right. Kind of, wink and a nod and a nudge, sort of a little bit there. And I thought that I was kind of laughing because seeing her do that in just the nice way Mina tells her off. She doesn't go over the top. It's very effective, saying, no, I don't think I'll ever return and you'll never see me again. Have a nice night. She stayed a lady the entire time she's telling her off. And again, she could have gone over the edge and called her a deviant and said, you should be ashamed of yourself. No, she's just like, no, not going to happen. See ya. And she leaves. And I thought that was a nice, again, continuation of her character, who she is.
Now, it was interesting to see then these characters, how when people are locked up in certain places, like the Invisible Man, for example, with his smoking jacket on and stuff like that, that was a classic nod back to the original movie, because I remember him sitting in like a smoking jacket like that in the original film. I loved those little nods back to old things that I'd seen before, seeing Hyde locked up and strapped, and really talking about where do we go from here, which was something that was particularly interesting to me, because it's such a ragtag group, and then we get to see for the first time Gulliver, Blakeney, Dr. Sin, Mistress Hill, Bumpo. I'm familiar. Obviously, I'm familiar with Gulliver. I'm guessing, was that Gulliver from Gulliver's Travels? Is that how you were taking that?
I think so.
I didn't. A lot of those
That's
doctors.
how I took it.
Dr. Sin, I remember as a character knowing before, but I'm guessing that's one of many previous leagues that were being listed as being put together through this.
Yeah, I took it that anytime we see a reference to classic literature, that is the person. That's how I've been reading all of this stuff. And I like the fact that their headquarters was in the British Museum, which I've been there, and it's a really cool place, and it's got a nice comic shop right across the street, so it's a really neat experience over there. You can throw that in there.
Well, there you go. But this Cavorite that they're referring to was actually based on a 1901 scientific romance novel by H.G. Wells, The First Men in the Moon. And Dr. Cavor was the scientist in it, and he actually created this. I looked that up. And that was interesting to see that even the material that was being brought into this had a literary place.
Outstanding.
Yeah. So it was all right around that era. So, this anti-gravity thing, and them scrambling for that, saying airships. What happens if we have airships? One group has airships, they can take out our whole country, and we have little to no way to handle that because we don't have the type of it's a race to the air.
Yeah.
And I loved that whole kind of sense of that. Added a pulp feel to the whole thing for me, which I really enjoyed throughout this. It just had this really cool pulpy adventure story feel to it that I never quite lost. That's why I think it felt fresh. It's proof that comics really can take place in any era, can tell stories from any era. I never felt, though, that this story felt dated. Like, this was written in 99, and, takes place, obviously, in the early 1900s, that era. The late 1800s, I should say, is when it takes place. But all the characters are being pulled from literature from the late 18 and 1900s. And it never feels, like, dated. Did it to you? Did this feel like something from out of a time period or something? Or did it feel like contemporary in its storytelling?
Well, it's funny because it's a timepiece-oriented story, but it did feel very realistic. It felt very modern. It didn't feel... I never want... Like, sometimes when I'll see, like, a movie that's, a period piece... it throws me, and I'm like, I don't know about if I like this as much as modern day thriller or something. But this one had all just a classic story being told. It fit the time period. It was kind of neat to see them in the time period, and I never once felt uncomfortable or out of date or anything. This was just a wonderful story that holds up to date, written back then about even farther in the past. And I thought that for me was just it was a strength of the story. It's kind of like I can sit down and read Three Musketeers anytime without any hesitation and not have any issue with it, just because it is a classic of literature. And this, for me, has that same type of classical literature that can be read at any time and still be enjoyed. And I think part of it is his love of these classical literary characters and just making them feel like they do fit together, that they are all from the same time and everything, just where they fit and where they gel together. And I think that's just a really, just an outstanding work on the creative part, that you do get that feeling that everything makes sense and it is, where it should be.
What's interesting is at the end of the second issue is really where we find out the end game. Like, what are they being put together for? We had 2 issues, which was an interesting thing about the storytelling. 2 issues knowing that they were being banded together to help protect the country of England. But it really was more, like now we've got this warlord from the Orient who's putting together this, who's, gotten this element, this Cavorite, and he's going to be building airships, and, they're in danger of this threat. We really don't find out all these details until the end of issue 2, which I thought was fascinating. And I'm like, I didn't remember that being the case. And I think, the way that the story was so paced, there was so much going on and so much to follow that you're never really worried about that. You're worried about how they're going to accomplish each goal of getting each of these members, that it doesn't really occur to you to think, wait, they don't even know why they're being pulled together yet, really, other than that there's a threat. And I love that at the end of issue 2, we find out what that threat is.
Oh, definitely. And it was funny because I liked how they threw it out there. And when they first start talking about the Cavorite and the lunar mission, again, the look of shock on Quartermain's face, like, did they just say lunar mission? Just that kind of, holy crud, we're going to the moon? And I liked how they were sitting there throwing out there saying, oh, yeah, we're planning it for the 1900s. I was like, it was, again, a great I was like, oh, nice. And it was one of those cool artistic moments where I had that same shock on my face, when I'm reading that they're planning it. We see it with him, and then the team goes and they're getting together and they're figuring it out. I liked that, just that meeting of them all, the meeting of the minds as they're laying out the plan, they're thinking things through. It's a good team element and a good team usage of these 4 outsiders, these 4 individuals who are starting to come together and they're starting to gel as a team. We're starting to see some of the early team dynamic moments, and I thought that was a really cool moment where it's just them sitting around the table, but it is them laying out the game plan.
The last page of the second issue where you get to see down east in the Limehouse, I loved seeing the villain in the background in that like kind of cloudy fog, seeing his face. I thought that was something that was really well done. And it was something I got to admit I didn't notice in my first couple read-throughs. It was something that I've noticed in recent years when I went back through and reread it. I'm like, wait a minute, that's really cool that they've got the villain back there in the clouds. That was something that was a neat little, sense of foreboding to the whole thing. I think I was so focused on everything that was going on with the little people dangling off the sides of the buildings and stuff like that.
Yeah.
All the deviant nature of that place that I never really noticed that big. Back in the background, they had the face of the big villain, and it's kind of in the next edition of the Boys Picture Monthly.
Well, and here's the thing, Norge. Mm-hmm. I didn't notice that.
Oh, really?
You're mentioning it now. This is the first. I just opened up my issues, and I'm like, wow, there it is. Why didn't I never notice that before? And that is, it's right in the clouds, because what I was doing, I was looking through all those images to see if I could see any of the characters, if I could see, Fu Manchu, if I could see, any of the, Bond or anybody that, would be a character that I would recognize in there. I wasn't looking into the sky.
Well, there's a ton going on in the, foreground. That to look into the background that far is something that, I didn't do until later read-throughs. Because I was so busy. I mean, there's through the entire foreground from top to bottom, there's a ton going on and a lot to see. The artwork in this, I just think, is spectacular. It's something that's through the series. I remember being in awe of it in '99 and appreciating it more now. I think I've just grown as a reader. And I think that's something as fans that I think there's always room as a comic fan to continue growing in this hobby and the understanding of it. And wow, it's a very cool read.
Reaching melting point. Not sure we can make it.
Hey, Sean. Hey, Jim. It's Donnie Salvo here. What's going on? I was just wondering, with the new 52 coming out, out of all those books, was there something, was there a couple of titles there that after hearing about things from like San Diego and stuff that you're a little more excited about than you were initially? Like, for me personally, it would probably be iVampire and Demon Knights. I think that's it. Yeah, Demon Knights. Yeah. Was really on the fence about them both. Like, they sound, they're weird enough to buy, but then, give them a try. But after that, I didn't. But after San Diego, forget it. It's all like, those are the two like I'm most excited for. All right. Well, interested to hear what you think. Okay. Take it easy. Bye.
Well, that's interesting, because for me, I was excited for a lot of the time. Like, obviously anything Gail Simone was doing, like, Batgirl and Fury of Firestorm, I was excited about those right from the get-go. So that didn't change because of San Diego. It increased the excitement. I think the titles, I think what he's looking for is, was there anything you were turned around by because of San Diego? I think a lot of the supernatural titles, where I'm not as familiar with the characters, were ones, I agree with Donnie, like iVampire. I don't know a whole lot about that. I was more excited that because of San Diego. But I'm going to tell you what was a big turnaround for me for San Diego was Teen Titans. There was a title that going into San Diego, I was probably the most nervous about of the whole launch lineup. Drastic changes to the team. I was really worried about what is Tim Drake going to be like. Then after Tim Drake, I started to get a little more confident when I found out that he was going to be he was going to be formerly a Robin, and he had the computer skills and stuff like that. Everything we know from Tim Drake is going to still be intact, as far as his basic premise. I was then concerned about things like Superboy and Wonder Girl and all that. The more I'm hearing about Teen Titans, the more excited I'm getting for Teen Titans. So that was a big switch for me for San Diego. Another book that I think I was excited about because of the creative team, so I was in and on board, but Captain Atom. The more they talked about that at San Diego, and Freddie Williams was talking about his relationship with J.T. Cruel, and just how the energy the two of them have working together on that, and how Freddie's going to be doing some new kind of ink wash thing that he's going to be doing with his art. So we're getting a fresh art take. Specifically for the character of Captain Atom, he's going to look a little different than the characters in the book to kind of showcase his powers and stuff. It really showed me that the art and story, the presentation of this book is going to be really geared towards telling a great, interesting story with this unique character. So the whole visual presentation, I'm a fan of that. We talked about our love for books like The Shield and stuff like that. The Spirit, the most recent Spirit series, I think one of the things that both of those had in common was that its visual presentation and storytelling style really matched the character. And Captain Atom is one of those that is going to kind of fit that mold for me. So those were two. I've been excited for all of the 52, but those were two that I thought San Diego kind of beefed me up, made me kind of take some notice of. Teen Titans, a lot of my worries have lessened a great deal after hearing them talk about what their plans are at San Diego. What about you? Where were you at?
For me, the biggest one was Demon Knight. That really, because I was like, okay, it should be interesting. Yeah, I wasn't excited about it, but then hearing them talk about it, I'm like, oh my God, this is outstanding. And it's to the point where I even, made this recommendation to my brother. He and I were talking about different titles. I'm like, dude, I think you'd really dig this. The whole Arthurian legend, the whole everything that you're dealing with, with little tweaks to Etrigan, that it's not just going to be an Etrigan story. There's more to it that's, being played out. And I was like, this is something you probably would like as well. So yeah, I went from being a mildly curious about it to actually recommending it to people. So that was a huge change for me. And it was really San Diego that did it. Couple stuff that calmed, I'm same boat as you, where Teen Titans, I really did calm down a lot, seeing and hearing them talk about it. And I'm like, okay, I think I'm still going to enjoy this story. I think I'm still going to get some cool, Titan stories. And, what I like about the Teen Titans now, I think there's a chance it's going to come there. So I dramatically calmed down on that one. I was like, okay, yeah, I'm curious to see where they go with this. Really want to see what happens to Tim and the team. But also the Justice League Dark. that series where it was the more the supernatural side of things, and I didn't know where that was going to go. I didn't know if that was going to be my kind of story, if I was going to enjoy it, what it was going to be. And I'm like, does it really need to be Justice League title? Couldn't it have been some other title? And just that was something that always had me wondering. Does it need to have the term Justice League on it? Shouldn't it have something else like, Shadow Pact? Could they have called it Shadow Pact? But hearing them talk about it, hearing where it's going to fit into the universe, I'm like, okay, this is another one that I'm like, yeah, I'm interested in this one. I want to see where this goes.
You know what other family of books that I really should? It's very similar to Teen Titans, Superman. That whole family. I got to be honest with you. The panel where they were talking in depth about. Both action and Superman and the direction that they're going with the character and why they're doing it, and that the suit's going to have a storytelling reason. It's not just changing the suit for no reason. There's actually a storytelling purpose behind it. The careful planning going into what they're doing with this, and just how it doesn't feel like it's just for shock value. There really is, a big epic plan for Superman, and not just Superman, for Supergirl, for Superboy, and the directions of those characters really got me excited. I'm going to be very curious. I'm still on the tentative level because I'm very much enjoying how Superman's been wrapping up. So I want to see more of those adventures, the character that we're currently seeing now. But it is funny how San Diego was really, that Superman panel in particular was one that I really needed to hear because I was terrified for Superman. And that really kind of made me go, well, wait a minute, this looks like it could be kind of fun. So I'm getting, I'm getting kind of interested in what's going on in the whole Superman verse. So some of those panels were pretty critical for me on those titles. When you were talking about the Demon Knights, they had me at Paul Cornell. Yeah. I love Paul Cornell. I've loved Paul Cornell since his Doctor Who novels. So if Paul Cornell's doing something, I'm there. So it's that was one I was excited already, and all that San Diego did was just reaffirm that I'm excited for that. It didn't change anything. I was already like, more Paul Cornell, you got me. I'm that way with Gail Simone. I'm that way. Scott Snyder. I'm that way. There's certain creators right now where just seeing them, I'm getting there with JT Cruel. I got to be honest with you. That guy has been batting pretty high for me. So when his new stuff's coming out, I'm pretty excited for his things as they're coming along. So it was really more of the big switches like Superman and Teen Titans for me. Captain Atom, just because it's a character that I've had a mixed interest in, but the premise, I remember when they originally announced the premise in the little blurb, the premise sounded cool to me, and the creative team had me at a go, because it was JT Cruel and Freddie, but them talking about it at San Diego and really talking about the art and how the art is being done for a storytelling reason, and how they're really looking to do something visually and storytelling-wise different with this character, it really has me excited. I feel there's going to be a lot of energy behind that book, and it's got me perking up.
When a creative team has a very obvious passion towards what they're working on, you see it and you feel it in the actual story that's being told. And again, I'm echoing a lot what you're saying. Just you could hear them as they're talking about what they were doing. That this wasn't. This was something they were very passionate about. This is something that they really wanted to create and bring out and kind of let us all see what's going on inside. And I'm like, that's another one where I was like, they had me at hello on that one. As soon as I heard the creative team, I was in. But just hearing them talk, it increased the excitement level.
I think they need to get into a habit. This isn't just a DC thing. I would say this for any comic company out there. If you're going to a major convention and you are going to be sitting behind a microphone at a panel, podcast it. Because I've got to be honest with you, hearing the creators talk about their passion for these books. And, I mean, why do you have the panels? Because it's a time for fans to interact with the creators, a chance for them to promote their work, a chance for them to really let people know what's going on, to give them, more than the little tiny paragraph blurb, to sell them on a concept. In this day and age, it's so easy to podcast. Get that stuff out there. Because to me, those San Diego panels were essential. I got excited for the entire line from those panels. I loved that they had panels that were just devoted towards the 52 and why they're doing it. I think that kind of thing Don, and this led to Donnie's phone call. He said, San Diego, hey, this got me excited for this. So these panels are getting people pumped up and excited for things. And I do think podcasting them was a brilliant move on their part. I know they've been doing that for a few years now, podcasting from San Diego. But I think that they shouldn't just do it at San Diego. If you take a look at DC's podcast library, they should have a lot more in there because they go to so many major conventions. Any convention you're at where you're having a panel, why aren't you podcasting it? It's to me, they need to do it. We like to report on the news on our show, but there's a difference in hearing us report it and give our reactions as from a fan standpoint to hearing it from the creators. And I do think their panels are complementary to stuff we do. I think it's a different tone hearing the creators talk about it and then hearing other podcasts. There's other podcasts, tons of podcasts that do reactions to news. And I think there's a difference to fan reaction to the actual creators doing it and hearing their emotion. You mentioned the passion. I love hearing that from creators. I think it's great. It's that's a chance for them to connect with us. And nowadays with the internet, don't make us just read text about it. Podcast it, get it out there, or do a partnership with another website. There's tons of websites that are out there, like your Newsaramas, your comic book resources, comic related stuff like that. Get one of them to record it for you and put it out if you don't want to do it at every convention. But to me, I don't know. I think the official DC podcast, I'd love to see them do that more often. And really, it's so easy. It's ready made to just record the panels when you're at these cons. Because I'd love to hear. I will listen to every single one of them. And, to me, that would be gold for us because we could listen to them, reference our listeners to them, and then, do our reaction to what they talked about on those podcasts when we talk about news. Because I think that's something that people, when they're listening in the car, listening to a DC podcast and coming back and listening to ours, and our reaction to some of the news coming out of those things, I think it'd be a great mix. So I hope they do more of that. And we're not the only podcast, obviously, that does that. So, it gives them a lot of mileage from doing one recording of a panel. And so I hope they consider doing more of that.
Hi, this is Henry, second week in a row calling. I just finished reading Kid Flash 3, and I'm sad. I don't know if you're talking about it yet, or if I'm going to spoil things for anyone, so if this is a spoiler, take your earbuds out of your ear now. Everyone dies. Every speedster but Barry Allen dies. And I grew up with all of them. I mean, Wally West, grew up with all of West, both Kid Flash, Impulse, whatever. I was there when it first came out. Max Mercury, awesome. Jesse Quick, and Jay Garrick before my time, but still, I've read plenty of them. I'm sad. I know it's shedding all the way for the new DC universe, and I'm excited, yet reserved about the new DC universe. But we'll see. I was sad. And I'd like to take a moment of silence to remember Bart Allen and all the other speeds. Have a great day.
I'm torn if I should put a pause in there so we could have that moment of silence, or what we should do. First of all,
I'm all for the moment of silence.
Are you? Yeah, I'm not going to do that. You can do that at pauses and do it on your own. Well, I actually really very, very great phone call. I get that way too. I'm a huge Flash family fan, so I'm going to back him up on that and say that was very bittersweet and sad for me. I know you've had varying history with a variety of these characters too. I know your love for Bart and reading that Max Mercury, all those characters from I always talk on the show about the Wade run, and the Wade run really had the whole Flash family concept. And the best connection I can put to you, Jim, would be your love for the Green Arrow family. That's what every issue was like of the Flash during that Wade run. There was this sense of legacy. There was this sense of history. And, I'm sad about it, but I think, it's funny, what's letting me go a little bit on that is the idea that there's going to be a JSA, and you better believe there better be a Jay Garrick.
Yeah.
I can't imagine them not having that. That's making me hope more for an alternate Earth. So I don't know.
Yeah.
How do you feel about all that?
Well, we know Bart's going to be around. So if Bart's going to be around, and if Jay is going to be in the JSA title, which is going to be, I'm agreeing. I think it's going to be an alternate Earth. So that means there's room that Wally could maybe be somewhere, or maybe someday get reintroduced or something. So, yes, they're dead, but I think when everything reboots in the universes, I think their energy will be somewhere. Maybe not in front of us, maybe not something that we can tangibly read and see, but the energy that is them will be somewhere, and someday we will get the story where we will be reunited with our old friends. That's what I'm sticking to. That's the attitude I'm holding on to this, because, while I'm not a huge Flash family fan, I did appreciate it, and I did enjoy it, and I did like it, and... so, yeah.
I feel like you're giving a speech for a cat you cremated and you're spreading over your lawn. Snuggles' energy still around us, and we'll feel Snuggles whenever we see the dandelions bloom. And
I like that.
So let's say a couple words for Wally and Max, too, who will be buried next to Snuggles. No, I totally agree with Henry, though, that, and I think that to me is good writing, because it was written well. Like, I really was emotionally, I think it was meant to pull at your heartstrings. I think Sterling Gates did a terrific job of doing that, and I want to care. I want to feel like the writer knew that we care about what happens to these characters, and I really felt like Sterling Gates did, and I felt like he wrote a story that showed that he knows fans care. He wants to give kind of a last hurrah to the fans, kind of a nod, an emotional nod to the fans. He wanted to give us what Henry's, all joking aside, what Henry's talking about, that moment of silence that we as readers could have at the end for these characters that we are emotionally attached to, and that, I think that's good writing. I think that happens in great television shows where there's a long-time character who maybe after 6 seasons is killed or something. I think, that's something in media that needs to happen. Video games, it happens sometimes where, there's a big role-playing game. I remember Final Fantasy VII, the Aerith, or however you pronounce her name, the girl dies in part of it, and it's a very emotional moment in the game. And I think, that's a part of this media, this pop culture media. When there's a character death, like, when does character death matter? It's when there's an emotional moment from it, and it pulls at your heartstrings. If it doesn't do that, it shouldn't be done. And I'm glad that they did. I'd rather have them do what they did in Kid Flash Lost than do nothing. Yeah. Could you imagine, like, in September, we find out with part of the 52, no more, it's only Barry, and obviously Bart now, and Teen Titans. But there's no acknowledgement of those characters, no chance for us as readers to have this moment. This is what I've really appreciated about August, has been that there's been acknowledgement of longtime fans and recognizing that the Flashpoint is going to, as an event, alter the world. And those alterations mean us saying goodbye to certain characters. They've given creators and readers an opportunity to have some closure with those characters. And you get those moments like what Henry's talking about. And there's nothing wrong with being tentative. We haven't read anything in September. So how can you be, you can't sit there like, I'm excited for September, but sure, there's that part of me that's like, well, how am I going to feel about all this? You don't know that till you pick up the book and read it. I'm excited to read them, and I'm hoping I get even more of a pop than I do now for the books that I've been enjoying. But, I think we're all going to be somewhat tentative. It's new.
You can't go into this without feeling a little bit, okay, what's going to happen now? So, and that's part of the excitement, that's part of the energy, that's part of, the mystery behind what we're facing. And I'm looking forward to it. I want some changes, and I'm glad to see them happen. And as you said, this was a great way, it was a great writer telling a farewell story, kind of giving us that moment, where we could just, we can have a good cry, we can have a good emotional reaction, we can have a good send-off.
What I think one of the things we've got to, as fans, stop trying to do is make a decision on something before it's been released. Yeah. What books am I going to love or hate in September? I have no idea. I want to be surprised by that. I want to pick up that book where I go, okay, I was mildly interested in this, and oh my God, it knocked my socks off. I mean, that's what I want in September. So I don't, what books am I excited for in September? I'm excited to read all of them to see which ones are blowing me away. I mean, that's what I'm looking for in September, which ones, and I don't care if I'm surprised by which ones do. I just want that emotion. I want that excitement that you get when you pick up a new comic and you're shocked by, like, how this is the book that you've been looking for all along, So, I mean, that's what September is for me. I can't make that decision now. I don't want to walk in knowing that I'm going to love or hate a certain book. You know what I mean?
Exactly.
You can't do that because you don't know. I don't know what the premise is on a lot of these books. We've gotten blurbs and commentary that has gotten me excited to check out certain books, but until I actually hold them in my hand, that's why we're going through all 52.
Yeah,
because I'm going to be curious to see what books you like and what your take is on some of these titles. We haven't done this in ages, where we've gone through the entire line. I mean, we've been scrambling to try and talk about certain favorites in this month. We're going to be talking about over the next month and a half to 2 months. 52 titles that are being released from DC, and going to do them all justice because I want to see which books we're digging. So this is going to be fun. That's to me kind of my excitement from the whole thing.
Yes.
But he's right.
Amen.
It is bittersweet to lose characters. Batgirl. Stephanie Brown as Batgirl was somebody who I adored. Yet I'm super excited for Barbara Gordon's series. So I don't think one is necessarily dependent on the other. I just hope that we saw the end of certain Flashes that I really dug. I'm hoping that in September the new Flash series starts to give me that same emotional attachment that I had to these characters. That's what I want, and that's where and that I don't want to bury them next to Snuggles.
Come on, Skreel. Let's pay these Plutonian beam makers a visit.
Jim, before we jump back into League of Extraordinary Gentlemen, I want to give an important news flash. Snuggles has actually come back from the dead. It's the Black Lantern Snuggles, and he's chasing our former mascot, Ragey, the Bulleteer Rat. So I wanted to let everyone know that we'll try to give regular Snuggles updates from time to time to let everyone know, because I guess Snuggles is kind of our new mascot now, or posthumously. Yeah. Black Lantern Snuggles is. I love the cover for League of Extraordinary Gentlemen #3. One of the things that's interesting about these covers for this series is each one of them is thematically very different. Like this one starts to get more into that whole Fu Manchu-y kind of dragon theme that they start to explore, and I loved seeing all these characters in their costumes. I love the Invisible Man in kind of proper dress, because that was my exposure to him in the film. In the film, we saw him wrapped up in the bandages. I'm talking about the original black and white film, where he's wrapped up in the bandages, but he's always dressed very prim and proper. Then he would go and do what you said. There'd be a lot of more of a deviant behavior from the character when he was out of this costume, so to speak. And then seeing, Quartermain kind of evolve back into the explorer-type character, and Nemo with kind of a reference to his octopus, the giant... squid-like character that we had from 20,000 Leagues. I don't know, there's something just, and even the dress of Mina matching, the current theme of the covers I thought were just very visually pleasing. And I love themes of covers.
Yeah. And in the trade, the covers are in the back of the book, so you got to go back, and I kind of wished, the layout, they had actually put it in the middle as the story's going on, but I still get them, so I get to see them. So yeah, I agree with you. There's some neat stuff there. At
least they're there. I've had certain trades before where they haven't been there, the covers at all, and I'm like, why would you not put them in the trade somewhere? Like, I agree with you. My preference would be putting them in chronological order where they belong with the book. But if you're going to put them, at least put them in the back as bonus pinups or whatever you want to call them. They should be there. I shouldn't get less in the trade than I got in the monthlies. That always baffled me. And I think more often now, I don't remember the last time I saw that, but I'm sure you've gotten trades before where you're like, where are the covers?
Yeah, I've had that a couple times. I'm like, dang it. One, I like it because it gives me a break, in the story. And if I'm reading, I'll stop at if I'm like, reading late and I'm getting tired, or I know I got to go somewhere, it's a good stopping point for me to know that I'm not stopping mid-issue, because I do have, problems with stopping mid-issue. I want to make sure I'm stopping right at a stopping point or a starting point. So it's a good break for me, but I don't know.
The evolution of these characters is something in issue 3 that we see right in the beginning. We've seen 2 issues of these characters being really unsure of whether they even want to be a part of this and why. But we're seeing a lot of what you're talking about. The Invisible Man telling everyone why I'm here for my own interests. But each one, as they're going through, is kind of saying, we're going forward. We're going to do this. And it's kind of them at the table sitting down and saying, it's time. Let's do this thing. And I love seeing it lead from that into the Invisible Man kind of getting ready. They did a whole page devoted to him doing the makeup and seeing what he had to do in order to be seen visibly and how long that would take. And imagine you can't be seen by anybody. We all have, as humans, a certain amount of vanity. And that's not necessarily a bad thing. You want to feel like you're visually pleasing to people. We all do certain things to, try and make ourselves presentable. And imagine not being able to be seen like that at all. Not being able to have that opportunity for somebody to compliment your appearance, compliment something about yourself. Even as simple as you have a nice smile today, you know what I mean? Little tiny things that we take for granted. No matter how you feel about yourself visually, people make comments to you at some point in time. Nice haircut, nice something. This guy doesn't have that at all. And to see the amount of time that he spends putting on that makeup and the wig and making everything, at least in his presence, just right. And then the first comment was, "Good Lord, Griffin, you look appalling. Is that grease paint?" We're just dying. I mean, you could feel like somebody taking a balloon, holding it up in front of him and just popping it. Here's your balloon, kid. I mean, wow. Tact is not Quartermain's strong suit.
Yeah, that's just, and it was funny because, he's seeing him just getting ready and he's taking his time. It just, it was one of the things that, again, it was another cool art moment of the face coming on and, the wig, and he's like, yeah, that's it. You could even kind of hear him saying, all right, you got the look. Do the double point to the mirror,
that's right. You, baby, you.
Yeah, and then just, bam, kneecap him.
You're all that in a bag of greasy chips. And I love it was just such a classic moment because of the build to that. And it was something that just struck me. I was laughing like crazy this time. That is really funny. None of which, if they'd only done a panel or two of him getting ready, I don't think it would have had as much pop. It was seeing how long that took and what that process entailed and how important that was to him. The pacing of that was great. And it was something that, it was funny how the narrative told something a little bit different, because the narrative was, basically filling in the story and in the direction they were going as they were gathering. But I loved seeing, I love when art sometimes tells a bit of a different story than what's being told in the dialogue. That's where I think narrative balloons sometimes work. We got to see the inner dialogue of, was that Mina? Talking her way through the plan that they were going, and this is great. I just love that. Now, Jekyll was somebody who, I was connecting to his constant worries about changing. His worries that any anxiety was going to set him off into a change, not trusting himself. At this point in your life, having gone through murders and stuff like that, that's part of the reason why. Why would he be so worried if he didn't know exactly everything that he'd done? And I'm not just talking about reading about it. I'm talking about subconsciously. You've got to have some sense of the events and what it was like to witness them. As, maybe a subconscious in the back of the mind or something like that. I always felt that Jekyll had that. And when you see him in those moments where he's, so distressed about changing again, I feel like he's distressed about changing because of what he will do when he's changed. And I think that denial has kept him and Hyde separate, those personalities separate. It's really a multiple personality disorder that the two have. I don't know how much Hulk you read. I was a big fan when Peter David wrote the Hulk, and he explored the fact that when the Hulk could turn into the Gray Hulk and the Green Hulk, and they were different aspects of Bruce Banner's fractured personality. I was a big fan of that in the run, when it was, coming to a resolution, the fact that these were part of Bruce Banner's personalities, and that if Bruce Banner could come to terms with them, he could actually control and be the personality in the forefront of the Hulk. I was a fan of that. I dug that kind of stuff, and I always felt that was a Jekyll and Hyde kind of story. And it's something that I connect with here, and I thought it was just kind of an interesting exploration of the character. So I don't know if you've read any. I don't know how much Hulk you've read. I know you read a decent amount of Marvel. I don't know how much of it was Hulk, but the Peter David stuff was absolutely terrific. He did some different things with the character that I really enjoyed at the time, and I read lengthy runs of him. Gary Frank, who did the artwork on Superman for a while, did the artwork on the Hulk for a lot of that run as well, and it was some of my first exposure to his artwork, which was absolutely terrific on the Hulk. So
yeah, I never really read the Hulk. Just the appearances and crossovers and some of the other stuff, or just the general knowledge of who the Hulk was. I've never really was a big Hulk fan for some reason. Now, it's funny, and I was a big fan of the TV series, and I understood the dramatic differences between the TV series and the comic, and when movies came out, I saw the movies, but I don't know, for some reason I never picked up that comic, never really locked into it.
I'd recommend some of those in trade. I really think it's some interesting, good stuff. And it was, I don't know why, just this time through I started really connecting a lot more with Jekyll and Hyde with the Hulk, which is kind of dumb that it took me this long to do that, because Hulk, it really is such a Jekyll and Hyde story. I mean, that's oversimplifying, but it is, again, a scientist exploring, in some ways to alter themselves as a better, and it going horribly wrong.
Whoops. Made a slight mistake there.
So, Mr. Kwong was an interesting bit because, they're looking for this doctor. And, it's interesting how they're getting these warnings now, do you really want to awaken these things? And we've got people now who are realizing that there are these couple of people in the world who are so dangerous and so deadly that they're going to speak in code. They're going to give you, even if they're going to give you any kind of information or clues, they're going to do it in such a way that hopefully no one will ever recognize that they gave you information. I really loved that sequence where they had to read into what this Kwong was saying to them in order to discover the possible hideout location. That was, I'm into that. It's kind of deep, and you look back and go, wow, that was cool. Like, how did she discover that? And I like mystery stories where sometimes there's detective work going on that you see the characters are really digging into it, but it's because they're looking at the way the person's carrying themselves, their fear, the fact that they're laying that out from the get-go, that they're not going to tell you straight up any information. They're going to have to do it in a way to protect themselves, their families, their friends, anybody close to them. And knowing that this Kwong guy, for what he already said, is probably in trouble.
Yeah, he's given off probably too much information. The fact that, people saw them walk into his tea shop, and, they were looking for information, that factor alone is going to get him in trouble. Because what were they doing in your tea shop? Well, they were just shopping for tea. Really? They were only in there for such and such time. They didn't walk out with bags of tea. A criminal mastermind like this, he's got people watching everywhere. And the fact that they walk in, if they don't buy something, if they don't come out with bags in their hands, that's an indicator. Maybe this guy just ratted him out. Maybe he gave out information. Maybe he did nothing. But when you're dealing with somebody this dangerous, this nasty, when you have this level of evil that you're up against, you don't want to risk anything. And it's even the same thing where, well, why does this guy stay in this town? Well, if he leaves, the bad guy's going to hunt him down and say, hey, why'd you leave my town? That's rude of you. I'm going to kill your family now. So you're in trouble if you stay. You're in trouble if you leave. It's one of those situations where you want to do what's right, but you know what? I want to live. And if I'm going to live, I can't flat out talk about this guy. I got to say this stuff. You can interpret whatever you want it to mean.
One of the things I really loved about how this issue played out is the team split up and they were searching for clues. The clue that Mina has found with the Invisible Man is a drastically important one. She's discovered that there's something under the bridge. And that open area is potentially the secret hideout. It isn't until the team all comes back together that they put their heads together, and even though there's this disbelief, that they discover the real purpose. Because I love this bit with Jekyll and Quartermain, where the two of them are trying to find out information and dig up little tiny clues. And you get to see, the Jekyll's in love with Mina. He doesn't know quite how to vocalize that yet, or at least drawn, maybe in love is a strong word. But through their adventures, he's at least, and why wouldn't you be? You got this strong, intelligent, woman who can, handle herself. And there's something, obviously, as a reader, I can get it. There's something about her that you can't help but admire. And there's been nothing revealed about her to indicate any kind of weird quirk or anything yet, other than the fact that something horrid has happened to her. But, other than that, beautiful, strong, she made it through all that, would be very understanding of what he's going through, because look what she's gone through. So why wouldn't he find an attraction there? And I loved the way that played out, because that just made sense that he would have those feelings.
And you think about their first introduction, she was kind of, dressed as a lady of the evening, so that was his first real exposure to her, was, kind of her all dolled up and, looking as she was looking. So there's even an extra added on to where he's like, he didn't see her initially as, just this tough disciplinary like Quartermain did, or just this, calculating woman like Nemo did, or even Skinner. He had a bad first impression with her, where he's getting cracked in the face with a paint can. He had a very positive first experience with her, and as things have gone on, she's always been. She probably is one of the people that probably doesn't look at him like he's a freak or something. She probably just deals with him like everybody else, and that's got to feel wonderful to him. So, yeah, I like seeing the fact that he was attracted. I like seeing how he's kind of feeling out Quartermain, and they're talking about where what's going on with them, and that was a nice kind of just dialogue between the two of them.
I love that they went all Judas on Ho Ling right away. Because, when you think about that, first of all, they don't know him. They're really going there based on a clue. But they went in with the intention of, hey, this guy owes us some money, and then you see what's happening to him. I don't know that it's such a good idea to say we know him at any level. I would be right away denying any knowledge of Ho Ling and what he's all about, too, when we see him being tortured like that.
Hey, that's a nasty torture. And it was one of those things where I was glad to see someone even like Quartermain was affected by that, because that is just nasty. But even he later on says it's not just a torture, it was the look in that man's eyes. That was Satan right there. They were in hell, and that was Satan that he was looking at. And I thought that was just a great description of what was going on.
What was great is you saw the reaction on Quartermain's face when they say wait. The shock and the look on his face, also on Jekyll. And what I loved was in the foreground, while Quartermain's dancing his way out of it, talking about the truth about the opium and that type of thing. And you see Jekyll fighting to keep control. Because what would have happened if he turned into Hyde? Now, I don't know that would have necessarily been such a bad thing.
I don't know. I think actually that would have been a bad thing in that it would have exposed that that somebody's after the big bad.
Ah, yeah, it's true too.
That would have tipped their hand too soon. Plus, who knows what the big bad was right there? Who knows what they would have done? When they saw Hyde, when they saw Quartermain, everything that comes together, that could have changed dramatically the chain of events. They got in to the bad guy's base because of the element of surprise, because they didn't know they were coming. If they found out someone was investigating them, then that's a whole nother level of difficulty.
Especially so close.
Yeah.
So you're 100% correct there. I think what it was for me as a fan, I wanted to see him go all Mr. Hyde on those guys after the torture with the caustic paint or whatever you want to call it. It was something that I really... it was me getting into the whole story. I think, as fans, we always want to see the heroes go off.
Yeah. And I tell you, I love the fact that these villains knew something was up. Something wasn't right. They weren't being completely truthful. So their first initial story didn't completely jive. These are people that have been dealing with the underworld. They're not trusting by nature. That's how you survive when you're doing these, when you're involved in this type of activity. So the fact that the story there laid out what didn't completely jive. And I love seeing villains call heroes on it and call the good guys on it, and not just be, oh, okay, have a nice day. No, these guys said, hey, something ain't right here. So then Quartermain had to shift his story again. And this time he made himself look like an idiot. And it was, again, the guy even said, you'd be glad your story amused me. I'm not going to kill you. And, exactly what Quartermain needed to do. He had to take it. He couldn't look like a position of power. He couldn't put himself like he was somebody dangerous or somebody that this guy needed to worry about. No, this is a stupid, guy who, doesn't know what the heck he's doing. He just bought some, he got tricked with a schoolyard prank. His buddy even took some. Oh my God, they're nothings. And that's why they dismissed him.
I would love to see this as an animated movie. Like, I'm looking at the whole team sitting together around that map, where Mina's talking to them and really trying to lead the squirrels to the nut. There's something about the visual styling of each of them there that this would, I just think, one of those direct-to-DVD DC animated releases. It'd be great to see this visually animated. I think their costumes, there's something just about the color schemes. It's something, it's really hard to do with real people, and I'd love to see that just kind of play out that way. Because I love what, they're Nemo's basically trying to say that, Cavorite is this anti-gravity stuff, and this is, we know that he's doing this for, to make airships and that type of thing, and she's saying to him, well, where would he do something like this? Right in the middle of the street, or, somewhere out in the open where people could see? And he's like sitting here, what are you talking about? So vile a scheme could not be carried out in public. It would have to be a place, though adequately large, was hidden and concealed, for example, like... And he stops right there, and he's like following her logic now, and sees where everything's going. And then that gets, again, Quartermain, who's also a non-believer, laying out the map, saying, "Oh my gosh, this has been right in front of us." And there was something about seeing her being the intelligent one who kind of led them to all of it. They were smart enough to see it as well, when they talked it through logically. But there was something powerful about that, and I like seeing a strong female in that role because. That was something that I thought was unique about this. She's the only female in this batch. And that was something that struck me this time around. I don't know why I didn't notice that previously, but it was something that struck me this time, that not only is she the only female, but she's their leader. And they're deferring to her, not because of the fact that they've been told she's the leader, not because of the fact that... that she's done anything she hasn't done anything powerful or anything, as far as to make her stand out that way. It's really the way she carries herself, her intelligence, and she's proven her worth just by her words, which is that was an interesting difference between this and the film. And I really enjoyed was seeing the fact that she hasn't shown any extraordinary abilities here. All she's done is throw out her intelligence, her strength of will, and her natural, kind of charisma and leadership ability here. And I really liked that. I mean, it was just something that was something that I think I missed from the film.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, she's definitely not a reluctant leader.
No, not at all. Well, although it could be argued that she didn't really want to be a part of this at the beginning. She was kind of talked into it by Campion, but...
We're not going to go there.
Yeah, hey, you started it. You don't want to go there. Don't bring it up.
I started as a joke.
Yeah.
Come on. But, it was, one of the things that you're talking about, how it was cool. I like seeing, not only just, you talk about how she's an intelligent and she's, bringing everyone to the table. And I thought that was cool, but I liked how each one of them was kind of adding a piece of the puzzle. Each one of them was building on each other. And that, again, is strong team dynamics for me. The strength, if you have a bunch of strong individuals who don't work together, you're not going to have a strong team. Just like if you have weaker individuals who are working together as a strong team, then you will have a strong team. Yeah. Here we have some really hard-hitting heroes, people who've been around the block, who know what they're doing. They're now coming together as the team. And that is what's making this team stronger. And I like seeing that moment. It began at the beginning of this issue when they're kind of sitting around laying out their game plan. And now at the end, they're really starting to get their groove. They're starting to understand, okay, we need to do this, this, and this. This is where we're at. And I love seeing just everything just lay out. And it wasn't like she wasn't being bossy. She wasn't being ordering. She was being one of those just letting it all flow out there. And every one of them said, dang it, that's what it is. Cool.
One other thing that I really appreciated in this series was the fact that with each location they were going into, they had to change their appearance. You know, the use of costuming. They're doing this undergrad. They don't want to be noticed. They're blending in. So they would do a lot of study of the environment they were going into. It. Each of them was dressed up. That added a sense of adventure to me in the whole thing. I really loved that. Obviously gives a chance for the artist to visually, you know, play around with the outfits that they wear and stuff like that. But storytelling-wise, it made so much sense. And it added to me a sense of mood, tone, atmosphere, also a sense of different location that they were going to. So it wasn't just the background scenery that was doing all that and the characters that were surrounding them. It was our characters that were following, our heroes, their visual appearances were changing. I really liked that. It was something that stood out for me. We're 3 issues in right now, and the amount of costume changes that have gone on for characters appropriately really fit this story, and it was something that I really dug. And also the choice of which characters were appropriate to infiltrate changed from mission to mission. Very important as well. I like that kind of intelligent stuff.
Well, you got to personalize your team, and I thought that was a nice usage of it.
The elephant gun being brought in. You said to be prepared.
Yeah.
But I loved as they were infiltrating too, they would pass, like we saw Jekyll. They passed Jekyll, you know, in those moments, even though he was just out on the street, you know, being in position. It was natural, like, and there was no acknowledgement of Jekyll. You know what I mean? Like, he was standing there. We saw him as the reader, as we should, but there also, you don't want anyone, if you're trying to infiltrate something, knowing that you're connected in any way. I love that Jekyll didn't acknowledge them. He just happened to be there. We knew as readers, because of what we've been told, that they were being in position for what was going next. And that was something that I really liked.
Yeah, and I like seeing Griffin sneak in and bump. Hey, what was that? Huh? You know, just that physical bumping that he had to do to get into it. And you're like, okay, Invisible Man's in place.
And they had to verify that it was a gust of wind. Like, they really pushed it, the two of them. Yeah, it was a gust of wind, had to be a gust of wind. And what are you going to say? It felt like a man? I mean, you know, you just can't, like, what do you do at that point? You're almost like, they're convincing him subconsciously that, you know, what are you going to say it is other than that? You know, why would you think it was a man? You know what I mean? So it was great, because if you felt like something like that bumped you, you'd be crazy to admit to somebody that it felt like a person, right?
Yeah, you can't, you know, you got to go with the most logical answer. And,
right.
And because you don't want to sound like a nut jobby.
So it was something that was great. The hard part about working with him in these type of infiltration missions is you can't see him. So you know he's inside. So I loved what they're like, well, we're in, and I think Griffin's in now too. Which way now? I love that I think he's in, because you don't know. I mean, you felt him go by. You're hoping he's in there somewhere, but where do you go from that point? The kiss between the two of them was great. Because, you know, he was right. Quartermain was right to do it. But I loved the kind of, you know, you ever do that again, you shouldn't do that.
I was laughing hysterically throughout this because, you know, it's an old school movie, old school story where you see the bad guys coming and you got to pretend like they're kissing, you know. And there is still that attraction. Quartermain is starting to have some attraction towards her. And the fact that the look on her face it reminded me of, like, you know, elementary kids where they're like, oh, he kissed me, you kiss me again, I'm going to sock you. You know, just that whole kind of just visceral reaction that she had. It kind of like, I was like, this is kind of neat. I saw it so many different levels of different things playing out. Like, part of me is saying, okay, is she now kind of having some feelings towards him, starting to see some of the Quartermain that she grew up as a schoolgirl reading about, but she doesn't want to come across that? Is there some of her issues where she's worried about what she would do if she's kind of let herself go? There's multiple things going through my head.
Now, I see, that was just it. I mentioned it earlier that I saw there being some kind of little tiny thing there. And I know it's not over the top, but I do think that there is some truth to the whole thing. People can protest way too much. Yeah. And sometimes if you're violently protesting, like these two have been, that there is something there subconsciously between the two of them. So I wasn't the only one reading it that way, right?
Oh, God, no. No, I definitely... That was one of the things I was laughing about when I saw her reaction. She was protesting way too much, and he especially was way over the top. I think she's just at the beginning stages, and he's a little bit farther than she is.
Like, a female I'm not interested in. I don't feel this excessive need to put down reasons why I'm not interested in. You know what I mean? Like, I don't feel the need to excessively push the issue to the point where I'm insulting her. I think once you start getting into that level where you're doing it that heavily,
Yeah.
and it's especially, I'm not talking about insulting. I'm talking about insulting with the intention of telling somebody, there's no way I could ever be interested in her. And here's why. And this is what she's got, this and that. When you've got to put it in those type of frameworks where you're telling somebody why so many times that you're not interested in the person and why, that's, I think there's people you genuinely dislike and you do for that reason. But to do that over and over again where you're prefacing it with, not interested in that person, anything like that, there's usually something more there.
Yeah, and it was also another artistic moment where you look and you kind of see that, because you think back to when, when Quartermain and, Hyde and Jekyll were, getting information. And he said, hey, I'm looking, he gave him the story that he was looking to buy opium. And Jekyll's like, you're not really looking. He's like, oh, no, I'm not going to deal with that woman again. And that kind of led to their whole story. You could see right there that he didn't want to, he's saying he didn't want it to be like he didn't want to deal with her wrath. But it was also part of it. You can tell he didn't want to, hurt her. He didn't want her to look down on him. He didn't want to look bad in her eyes. And you can kind of see it in that whole discussion that those two had. And then again, just reaffirming it here.
Yeah, absolutely. I totally agree with you on that. I love infiltration sequences in movies and in comics. I love where you see them like lurking behind corners. Like I love, she's like popped up behind the corner looking in to see what's going on. They're waiting for the guard to go by and they're sneaking quickly and quietly behind him. And they go in to see the airship for the first time. At which, we see elements of what looks like some of Nemo's work in there. A lot of what we see in the Nautilus, we see in this crazy airship. I'm a big fan in role-playing games or when there's airships and spacecrafts and stuff like that. This so had that element.
Yeah.
And seeing what they were able to build underground like that and how dangerous that craft could be was just mind-blowing. I loved the closing blurbs where "Tremble, dearest reader, at the horrid spectacle of Johnny Chinaman, armed with the mighty weapons of our new electric age, bent on turning them against our island home." I love that whole little bit of, tune in next time. I love those kind of things. And there was something about the whole atmosphere and mood of the way this book was crafted. That's what makes it stand up to me, I think. It definitely fits all of that.
One of the things that I really dig leading up to that was when they were sneaking through the tunnels, and you have those moments of really heavy darkness, and they're walking by candlelight, and the coloring just went through, did that solid, darker, that blue tint through everything. We still had the great details on the stuff. We still could see stuff, but you could very clearly tell that they're walking through basically pitch darkness. And I thought that, again, that was a cool color usage, a cool art usage.
Colorists have a great job of not just bringing out the color pop that we see in certain sequences, but also developing a sense of light sourcing in the shades and tones that they choose. And you're right, that's something they set the atmosphere, mood, and tone a lot of times, and it's where they're a lot of times the unsung heroes of comics, because they're things that we as readers notice subconsciously, as we're enjoying the art, but they're so drastically important to our enjoyment. A lot of the mood and tone that you and I have been talking out through this entire discussion, a lot of that it can be also needs to also be attributed to the color work done on this. Just a beautiful piece all the way through, where a lot of mood had to be set because of the fact of the color. The ship. A lot of the pop of the ship comes from the color work on the ship. That looks like a pretty nasty looking beast.
Oh God, big time. That, and again, you're seeing like the bright greens, the bright reds, the fang teeth, some of the what will probably be the control tower, this big gun sitting on the front there. There's just a lot of, and even the steam just kind of building a lot of what's
layered. Notes. It's layered. You can see foreground and background steam. It just gives you the sense of it filling up the whole room, which to me adds a sense of what kind of power is that thing packing that it's giving up that much steam, Because it's not just the steam of the trains that are bringing in equipment. It's the steam coming off of that thing from every different direction, right out of the nose of the thing, too.
Yeah.
This thing is built for intimidation.
Yeah, well, and really good warships do that. You want to have that little oh my factor, right? As the first time the enemy sees you, you want them a little bit nervous. You want them scared because, one, you strike fear in somebody, they're not going to react as fast, their accuracy is going to be off, so you're trying to shoot at this thing. If your hand's shaking, you ain't hitting anything, and that's, adds to the whole kind of shock and awe tactics.
Yeah, I agree. It was, to me, just one of the cool parts of this series. At the halfway point of it, it's just, I'm so glad that we did this on the show, because this has been one of those, it's one of those on the short list since we started this podcast I wanted to touch on. And we've done Alan Moore's work before on the show, so I wanted to space it out, a bit, so that way, we could talk about other classic works as well. But this is one of those on my short list of favorite Alan Moore reads. And I was wondering, because it had been a number of years since I'd read League of Extraordinary Gentlemen, I was wondering how I was going to enjoy this one. And it was really the release of the omnibus and the fact that we were using it for a contest prize that kind of drove me to say, hey, let's do League of Extraordinary Gentlemen, because I knew you hadn't read it. And I'm so glad that the omnibus was released, because it reinvigorated me to want to read this again. And you brought up the movie, and I'm like, okay, well, it was a good chance for me to see the movie again, to see, how I felt about that. So I'm looking forward to our second discussion, which is going to be in 2 shows. We're going to skip one because we're doing a special release, which we're going to talk about at the end of the podcast, which isn't going to be too big of a shock considering what's coming out this week. But there's a reason why we're going to bump one episode for the second part of League of Extraordinary Gentlemen. I don't think anyone's going to go, oh my gosh. But we'll be getting back to the second part of this after that. So
He is called Hawkman. His gauntlets possess awesome powers.
Jim, our next episode, we are going to take a little break from League of Extraordinary Gentlemen and do a special release this week. I'm shooting for Thursday night, and you can guess what we're going to be talking about. Flashpoint 5 and Justice League number 1. That's going to be the big release this week, so that'll give us a day to read everything and prepare and do a nice chat on Thursday night. And I'd like to release it the same night. That's going to be very loosely edited, because the idea is to get it out to you fast, to get initial impressions of the first books of the 52. The first book, I should say, of the 52. So we will be back Thursday night with another release for you guys. So very cool. 2 books. So it'll be a little shorter than our usual ones, well, I think.
Hold on, really?
I said I think. That's still, I'm saying we would do it if we do 2 hours for 2 books. Although, there's a lot to be discussed. And I know that Justice League one's oversized, isn't it? Isn't it bigger?
I believe so.
Because it's an extra, isn't it an extra buck? Isn't that the $3.99 book?
Yeah, I think so.
So, I don't know. And then the end of Flashpoint, obviously, there's a lot to discuss there. Yeah, you're right. It's probably going to be a full show.
Plus, if anybody has any voicemails you want to call in.
Right, exactly. So we'll be back the following episode with the rest of League of Extraordinary Gentlemen. Then the following week, we'll begin our look at the 52. So our lineup for our next few episodes is pretty packed. Really excited to finish off League of Extraordinary Gentlemen. Then we get to jump the next episode right into our week-by-week look at the 52 comics that are coming out in DC. We also have a special bonus episode that's going to be released. Ted Sikora comes back to join us on discussing Apama number 2. That will be released next week as well as a bonus show. Lots of content coming from the Raging Bullets. Jim, our sponsors for this episode are DCBService.com and InStockTrades.com. Remind everyone to check out DCBService.com. If you haven't been pre-ordering your 52 books, you should. All 52 DC number 2 issues at that special discount, $159.48, 50% off, only $79.74. Similar savings, that might be the exact same, I'm not quite sure yet, from DCB Service next month on the number 3 issues. They're bundling again, which is really cool. That's nice and convenient as well. And over at InStockTrades.com, if you haven't read it yet, and you haven't been reading it yet, hopefully this episode convinces you should read League of Extraordinary Gentlemen Volume 1. We are in 2 weeks going to be, not in 2 weeks, in 2 episodes. It's not going to be quite 2 weeks because we're going to be releasing a little quicker. League of Extraordinary Gentlemen Volume 1, $14.95 regularly, 38% off, only $9.27. They do have the other volumes there as well. Volume 2 and Black Dossier, for anybody that wants to continue reading this, are both available. Also, there's 2 issues that have been released by Top Shelf Comics. That's actually comprise the start of Volume 3 of League of Extraordinary Gentlemen. So if you're digging this and you haven't been following where the series has gone, you can actually continue reading it at Top Shelf Comics as well. So there's 2 volumes of that, and I'm not sure if issue 3 has been solicited yet, but I'm really digging League of Extraordinary Gentlemen and encourage you to continue following it beyond this initial trade. So that's League of Extraordinary Gentlemen. We will see everyone in a few days with the kickoff of the new DCU.
Bye!
Flying through space and time, 1,000 different lifetimes. Faded for love and loss and incredibly clear sightlines. Swinging your mace around, such a practical outlook. Helping the JSA and occasionally supporting your own book. Hawkman, Hawkman, eagle eyes can't see. Hawkman, your plan and what you do to me. Hawkman. The villains are closing in, be they Thanon Guard or Egyptian. Working so hard to thwart you and Hawkgirl's mission. The odds are not on your side, and danger seems to stack up. Things would be so much easier